Welcome everyone to the Town of Greater Napanee regular session of council for the 14th day of November 2023. Before we get started, I just want to remind everybody that this evening's meeting is going to be recorded and live streamed to the Town of Greater Napanee YouTube channel. There may also be some reporters here from Global News. So if you see somebody come in with a big camera, that's who they are. So I just want to let everybody know that we have a number of people registered to speak tonight, which may put the gallery seating over capacity. And I'm sure you folks are aware of that by now. In order to ensure that we do not block any emergency exits prior seating is being given to those that would be registered to speak to an item on the agenda. Overflow seating has been made available downstairs. And I just want to thank everyone for your interest for coming out tonight, and let's have a good meeting. Just again, before we get started, like to wish some best wishes to Carolyn Norrie. You can see that Bob Norrie, one of our counselors, isn't here tonight. She's recovering from an operation. So we want to wish her all the best wishes and a speedy recovery to that. So having said all that, we'll call the meeting to order. We'll start off with a closed session, our rise and report from closed session. We'll look for a motion to rise and report from closed session. Moved by Councillor Shank, seconded by Councillor Pennell. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. I'd like to report that in closed session tonight, council approved the closed session minutes from September 26, 2023, received for information a report regarding recruitment update, received a report regarding commercial land sale listings and gave direction to staff, received 2 human resources reports and gave direction to staff, received for information a confidential rate schedule report, and received a report regarding an agreement negotiation and gave direction to staff. Now from our rise and report, there's a couple of motions that we'll be looking for. The first one is with respect to physician agreement, that council authorize the execution of a forgivable loan agreement with a physician who wishes to establish a medical practice in the town of Greater Napanee under the town's standard terms and conditions for physician incentive agreements in the aggregate amount of $100,000 for a 5-year term as presented in the confidential staff report SR 333-2023. Moved by Councillor Shank, seconded by Councillor Hicks. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. The second motion will be organizational chart, that council authorize the removal of the Director of Human Resources position from the town's organizational chart and reinstatement of the Manager of Human Resources position previously approved by council on the 12th of October 2021. Moved by Councillor Pennell, seconded by Deputy Mayor Calver. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Look for a motion for the adoption of the agenda as presented. Moved by Deputy Mayor Calver, seconded by Councillor Martin. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof? And I believe we do have a couple. We'll start with Councillor Pennell, and then we'll go to Councillor Hicks and then to Councillor Shank.
Thank you, Worship. I have a conflict of interest with tonight's open meeting of 5.2 for Benn's Point. Subdivision, one of the applicants is my employer.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Pennell. Councillor Hicks.
Through your worship, I'm declaring a conflict as a parishioner of St. Mary Magdalene Church in the matter of the utility bill, and they're seeking relief.
Great, thanks, Councillor Hitch. I think that's 10.5 on our agenda as well. And Councillor Shank.
I have possibly a conflict of interest in 10.1, Boralex, BESS. A family member owns the property adjacent to the proposed site.
Great, thanks, Councillor Shank. Next up, we've got the non-statutory public meeting. We're going to look for a motion to convene the public meeting with respect to the Benns Point subdivision. And I believe Councillor Shank or Councillor Pennell, this is one you've declared on. So I'll look for a motion moved by Deputy Mayor Calver, seconded by Councillor Martin. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. And I see, Michael, you've come to the front desk, so we will turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, Worship. This evening, we're holding a non-statutory public meeting to reintroduce the proposed Benn's Point subdivision. This project has been on the books for quite a number of years, has advanced partway through the approvals process, has received official plan amendment. Previously, draft plan approval has been under review for quite a number of years and had gone dormant for a little while, but there has been a recent change in ownership, and that's been reactivated and brought back to life. Staff felt it was pertinent to effectively hold a public meeting, although no longer required under the provisions of the Planning Act for draft plan approvals. There's no statutory requirement to hold a public meeting when considering draft plan of subdivision applications. However, given that the site has been under consideration for a number of years, it predated these changes to the Planning Act, and it makes good sense to carry on with getting in front of the public and hearing any concerns of council and the public prior to staff bringing back a recommendation to council for consideration. So to my right is Ruth Ferguson Althouse, and she is the principal at RFA Planning Consultant located in Belleville, and she is representing the applicant this evening. And I will turn it over to Ruth to reintroduce the project. And any questions can either be directed to Ruth or myself.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Nobes, and welcome, ma'am. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Michael and Mayor Richardson and members of council and the public that may be here this evening to find out more about the Benn's Point draft plan of subdivision. As Michael mentioned, this has been a file that's lingered for quite some time, and I was the planner that was originally involved with the previous owners who have subsequently sold it to new owners, and representatives of those owners are also in attendance tonight for this meeting. What's that? Sit down, okay. Sorry. Not sure which screen to look at. I've got them on either side. This slide shows the outline of the property in green at the terminus of Benn's Point Road. It's about 47 acres or 19 hectares in area, and it's located in the south portion of the town. It has frontage at the end of Benn's Point Road, as well as surrounding on Hay Bay, surrounded by rural and rural residential uses, and it's currently vacant. This slide shows some of the history of the submissions of the application going back to 2015, where a complete submission was made to amend the official plan, draft plan of subdivision, and rezoning. And there were a number of studies that were submitted at that time in support of the application. At the time of the submission, the official plan was the only application that was moved forward. And there was an amendment to designate these lands for shoreline residential at that time in 2015. The other studies have been reviewed by various agencies and peer reviewers over that time. And the principal focus since that original submission has been the hydrogeological assessment to determine if there's sufficient water supply to service the subdivision. And it's been subject to numerous peer reviews. There was a period of time that the application was dormant, and then it's been picked up, and additional hydrogeological assessments have been underway and peer reviewed by the municipality. This slide shows the official plan and how the lands are affected by the Napanee official plan. The lands are circled in red and are designated environmental protection and shoreline residential. As mentioned, there was an official plan amendment to designate the lands to shoreline residential, and the environmental protection lands do remain unchanged by the application. The subdivision conforms to all of the shoreline residential policies in the Napanee official plan. This slide provides an outline of the zoning existing today for the site. It is in an agricultural and environmental protection zone. As I referenced, there was a rezoning application that was submitted in 2015, And there will be a rezoning subsequent to draft approval if issued to a shoreline residential zone with special provisions, or alternatively a rural residential zone. And that is a condition of the draft approval for the subdivision. The slide shows an outline of the draft plan of subdivision. I apologize, it's a bit hard to read. I do have a full-scale copy of the plan with me. There are 11 lots proposed in total for the subdivision, and these lots are fairly large. They range in size from 0.9 hectares, which is about 2.2 acres, up to 3 hectares in area. They all have a minimum lot frontage on the road of 60 meters or around 200 feet, and all of the lots extend to Hay Bay. There will be a public access provided to Hay Bay in a block that's deeded as park, and all of the lots are serviced by private individual wells and septic systems. The Street A on the draft plan is an extension of Benn's Point, which would have a full turnaround. This slide shows an outline in red of the public access, which was requested by previous councils and by the planning consultant at the time of IBI. There was a desire to have a public walkway so that any residents living along Benns Point Road would have an ability to walk down to the end of Benns Point. And it's intended as a pedestrian access. It's 5 meters wide, and it does extend into a fairly sensitive area. All of the shoreline being in an EP protected area. So it is not intended for motorized watercraft, just for small crafts such as a canoe or kayak. There were environmental impact studies that were prepared in support of the application, and these will be updated as a condition of draft approval. But essentially, all of the development will be on the upland area of the subdivision, including buildings, the roadway, and septic systems. The development will be controlled along the shoreline to protect the fish and the wetland habitat there. And there's a 40-meter natural buffer and setback proposed along the shoreline of the entire subdivision. There are a number of draft conditions that are being proposed through the municipal staff and their consultants. Here are a few of them highlighted. I've mentioned that there will be a rezoning that's required. There's a transportation brief that the county had requested. That is a requirement before the subdivision is finally approved. There will be updated stormwater management report prepared, and the hydrogeological report will be finalized. There's additional archaeological assessments required. There are some sites that were determined through a stage 2 investigation along the proposed road extension. And there will be detailed lot grading and drainage plans, and additional inventory of the natural heritage areas. And finally, the parkland easement also being deeded to the town. So that concludes my presentation. It's an 11-lot subdivision along Benns Point Road. It's for single detached homes on private wells and septics. There have been numerous technical studies prepared over the past, but these will be finalized and updated prior to final approval of the subdivision. The lands are designated shoreline residential, and the subdivision does conform to the official plan policies, and a rezoning will be required. And finally, Benns Point Road will be extended to municipal standards with a proper turnaround. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Ruth. So first, I think we'll canvass the council and see if council has any questions of Michael or Ruth. And then because it is a public meeting, where we'll open up the floor, that if there's any people here to speak for or against this application, we'll ask you folks to come up if there's anybody here for that. So first of all, does council have any questions or comments? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Calver.
Through you, your worship. So you're saying all these lots are going to have their own individual wells on them out there?
Yes, that's correct.
And would they be dug, drilled, or blasted? What type of wells are we talking?
Do you want to go ahead?
Sure. There's been a number of dug wells installed on the property that were tested. There was an older drilled well that was also reviewed. The recommendations were that I believe dug wells ultimately would be utilized. The draft conditions, which we're going to be going back and forth with the proponent on, but what our recommendation will be at this point in time, and what the recommendation actually of the proponent hydrogeologist and our town peer review consultant hydrogeologist agrees with, is that prior to final plan of subdivision approval to actually create the lots, each of the lots has the well installed, and each of those wells is tested for conformity with Regulation 903 to determine potability and ensure there's adequate flow rate. At this point in time, based on the wells that have been installed, we're at a good level of comfort that these 11 lots can be serviced. But through the final plan approval process, that is where the actual, all of each lot would be installed with a well and tested prior to that final approval being rendered.
Great, thanks, Mr. Nobes. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Calver. I think you got another question.
I just want to make sure that they were all going to be retested, because in the last 2 years, we've seen extreme droughts and people are never ran out of water before, are running out now. But thank you.
Through your worship, and that was top of mind in re-reviewing the more updated hydrogeological assessment work, and that was certainly brought to the forefront by our peer review hydrogeologist. We want to make sure there's good reserve capacity in those periods of extended drought, and that we have enough recharge and quality of water to sustain each dwelling on the proposed parcels.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor. Actually, the Deputy Mayor took the greatest part of my question away from me. I was concerned about wells and septic systems in the rural area. Anytime you're dealing with a rural subdivision, sometimes the wells and septic systems can be, one can contaminate another or whatever, but with the number of lots, I was just curious myself if there was any predetermination of water supply. So basically my question has been answered.
I'll note through your worship, each sewage system would be down gradient relative to wells on each parcel and each respective adjacent parcel. So, and there also is ample room to site a current operable sewage system, and then have room for, in the future, another sewage system in case the primary fails, with still having ample room outside of those upland upgradient wells. So there's been good thought put towards ensuring that there is no interaction between sewage systems and wells, and ensuring that we do have good potability and quality and quantity of potable water.
Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, Councillor Martin. Is there any other, go ahead, Councillor Hicks.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So I have a question about the public access. You said it's pedestrian only and 5 meters wide,
That's correct.
and I heard mention of parkland.
There
So
would be cash, I didn't mention it, but there would be additional cash in lieu beyond the land dedication up to the 5%. So, you know, that is not even probably 1%. It's a small-ish block. So then the town would, in their conditions of draft approval, could ask for cash as well.
Okay. And one further question, if I may. Parking. So it's pedestrian only from the road, so we'll call it Benn's Point Road, to the water. If somebody out for a drive with their kayak on the roof decides this looks like an interesting spot, is there going to be provision for public parking? I'm not saying it's going to be 60 cars a day, but we have run into this in other areas with access to the waterfront. Is this going to be a problem for homeowners?
Well,
Is there going
it's a
to-
good question, and it does happen when these public accesses to water are provided. I mean, if good planning always says we should provide access to the waterfront, and then people drive there and clog up the roads. So it's a bylaw enforcement issue with respect to on-street parking. The intent was to serve the neighborhood, but that's not to prevent others from driving there, or even someone at the beginning of Benn's Point driving down and parking. So as a public street, it would be subject to the municipal bylaws to control parking.
So Michael is aware of the situation to which I refer, so I don't know if that can be factored into road width or that sort of thing.
Through your worship, it certainly is top of mind, and the reason that given the environmental sensitivity along the shoreline in this area, the intention is to keep it narrow to effectively eliminate a car to drive down there and try to park at the end, just given the sensitivities there. we don't foresee there being an influx. There would be quite an ample amount of space at the end of that cul-de-sac. Outside of driveways, there would effectively only be 2 driveways that would be on the end of this cul-de-sac. I would foresee, in the 5-6 car range, probably could be accommodated in that general area and still stay out of the way. The issue would be, if there's foot traffic and parking during winter months when snow clearing operations are underway, that's the bigger issue that we would need to consider. But outside of those periods of time, I wouldn't foresee it being an issue, but that's something that we're considering and looking at.
If I may, Your Honor. So ice fishing season comes to mind. I don't know if it's even any good in that area, but it was just something that came to mind with the water access. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Councillor Hicks. Is there any other questions or comments before we? Yep, go ahead, Councillor Shank.
So Mike, you've answered the questions about water and living in the area all my life, but so there's not going to be any shore wells because you were saying because the sewage system is going to be below the well. So that being the well being high, you're confident and you're either going to guarantee that after the well before they get approval, right?
Correct. So from my understanding, the proponents are seeking to, let me back up. They've been able to convince our peer review hydrogeologist that there is good water there, but we want it to be proven before we create these lots. And through that process, we would stipulate that during the dry months, during drought effectively is when the testing would occur. My understanding is that the applicants are seeking to get draft approval, given that we have a level of comfort, we would be able to move forward, not tonight, but at a future meeting in the not too distant future with a recommendation, get that draft approval in hand, and then they can secure more financing to actually undertake the installation of those wells and the testing. Financially, it's quite a capital expense. So that would be the next step, is get to draft approval. Then you can get necessary lending as required, and then be able to undertake checking off all the conditions to draft approval. But yeah, that's the intent, is no shore wells given the proximity of sewage systems. And back in the 2015-16 day, there was discussion around shore wells, but it effectively was crossed off the potential list given the topography of the site.
Go ahead,
The
Councillor
only
Shank.
reason why I'm mentioning that, Mike, is because it's been a known dry and at Ben's point. The other is, have the rules changed, or is it still the same that the developer has to pay up to 5% or a combination of both with parkland and cash prior to draft plan approval? Is that the same rule that's still existing, or?
Correct. It's been Bill 23 and 109 have made some modifications to that amount, but yeah, there's still the provision that we can acquire cash in lieu of the difference in what parkland would otherwise be required. Yeah, correct. I'd have to refresh myself on the figures post bills, but yes, there certainly would be cash in lieu.
Great, thanks, Councillor Shank. Thanks, Michael. Is there anything else from council before we move to the bottom of the council chambers? Seeing none, this is a public meeting. Is there anybody in the body of the council chambers that would like to speak for or against this project? Yep, come on up, sir, and we'll get you to provide your name, and we'll find you some space up front. Maybe I think Ruth can probably move to the back there. We'll keep Michael here just in case he needs to assist. So. Yes, sir. Just for the folks that are watching, if we could just get you to provide your name, and I'll get you to speak into the microphone because we can hear you here, but sometimes the people at home can't. So.
Hi, Council and Mayor. My name's Max Muller. I live on 1451 Benns Point Road. And I just have some concerns. I never want to see development stop, but I've lived there my whole life. And first of all, I've got about 4 or 5 things. Our road, we've got about 22 cars on our road now to pass each other here and there. And there's been a couple accidents on our road, if you can imagine, on a dead end road. And The width of the road, I'm not sure if that's, because if we're talking 11 houses, we're talking minimum probably 2 cars a house down there. So another 22 coming up and down the road. I'm sure there's been a bit of studies. I've seen something going on with it before. So that's one concern. Next concern is the water. Obviously, I live there. Some of my neighbors are here. We've all been there. We do have water. Over the 26 years my house has been there, I've had to bring water in 4 times. It's a dug well. It's not a bad well. I'm actually going down tomorrow to look at my well because one of our neighbors has just brought in a truckload of water. So all our neighbors on the road pretty much have had brought in water at some point. So this property down at Benn's Point, I'm very familiar with it. Been all over it as a kid. Neighbors used it and all this. So the access they're giving us is always been a road access to the water. I don't know if council has ever closed it. And right now he's got a bulldozer blocking the path down there, which we don't really mind. It stops any car traffic. But if that's part of it, if he's going to try closing that off, that access has always been there. The one that she showed us is we've always went to the point, the very end of it. That access that they showed us has been, we've seen it from 1889 or something like that. It's been deeded for the fisheries to go down through there. It's been fenced off by the farmer a long time ago. So they're not actually giving us that. It's already there. Second of all, it's environmentally protected down there. So when they do sell the property, I hope they tell whoever they're selling it to that they can only have canoe access. Second, on the water down there, for environmentally protected area. First, the last owner drilled more than 1 well and dug more than 1 well, and there was very little water found. And you're at the water table down there. Like, so I don't know, they should have more water down there than we do up on the hill. So that needs to be looked at. And then I've never seen in our area ever anybody blasting in dirt. In rock is one thing, but they blasted for 2 or 3 days a couple years ago. And from what I understand, the water still wasn't there. Now, that's not me saying it is or it isn't. It's just an observation. So there's some of my concerns. And should there be houses down there? Probably. 11, I'm not sure. I don't even think the wells can sustain it, but that's something you guys can discuss. But that was just my point right now, is that I've been there a long time and we do have water, but like I say, I'm going down tomorrow to check my well, and it's just one of those things. And they're down at the water table and they're not getting water. So thank you very much for listening.
Thanks, Max. If you just hang tight, just in case council has any questions of you, but thank you for speaking this evening. Does anybody have any questions of Max before he gets up? I got Councillor Shank and then Councillor Hicks.
Yeah, but what Max has told you is totally correct. If you went back on one of the proposed 11 lot subdivision, underline in through, if you look at it and expand it, you can see where the actual road is still there. All right, on their subdivision. It went to the point because I know the Lloyds and a lot of the other fishermen, and I've used it as access to get to the end of the bay. And anybody that has gone duck hunting or anything else, if they've had trouble, have come to the end. But I was on council at that time. All right. And I was proving I wanted to have, like, road access to it, for water, for the fire department, for, people to dock their boats. So there is road access, but I was outvoted at the time. So that's the reason why they went to this side. All right, 5 meter, because anytime you have water access, you know what I mean, is years down the line as the municipality grows, people need to get to the water. So I'm always a proponent of having that water access, but that was already been voted on. That's already been done. And I believe we can't do anything with that, right?
I think through your worship, at that time, it seemed like there was a direction of council as you're speaking to, and the proponents have planned around it. I will note our fire prevention officers has taken a look at this and considered the access to water. The request that's being made at this point in time is to have a dry hydrant installed with effectively underground tanks that can be essentially hooked onto somewhere within the subdivision. So not strictly getting to the bay, for example, but having the opportunity to connect onto a dry hydrant with underground tanks. That's being discussed at this point.
Thanks, Mr. Nobes. Councillor Hicks, you had a comment or question?
Not now. Councillor Shank answered it for me. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hicks. Is there anything else for Max before he leaves the front here? Seeing none, thank you again, Max, for coming and speaking tonight. Is there anybody else in the body of the council chambers that would like to speak for or against? Yep, come on up, sir. And again, if you could speak into the microphone, it'd be great. And we need to get your name for the record as well. So go ahead.
Good evening. Yes, good evening, Your Honor and Council. I'm Harvey Nickel. I live immediately adjacent to the development, so have quite a keen interest in it. Our land is on both sides of the road, so you know the traffic going through is of interest. But I do like the recommendation that has been brought forward that all of the lots need a new hydrogeological study. On the map, it showed that large lot that was the well on lot number 1 was tested and was proven to be inadequate. So they joined it to lot number 2. That's why there's a big one. On the opposite side, on the south side, there's the 2 very long lots. Both of those lots, I am confident they've dug 40 to 45 foot depth of well on them, and there's virtually no water. So we might as well know that up front. So whether they'll merge those 2 with lot 9 or 8 or something, but I can't envision that there's going to be adequate water. So I do support, and I hope that perhaps there's a different hydrogeological firm that does it, because I don't have a lot of credibility in the first one. The first one, they indicated in the report, for example, that they had shock treated the wells. They tested them. There was a high level of bacteria. And they said, oh, sorry, we didn't. Now we'll shock treat them. I mean, something as basic as that. So I'm just, I'd like just a heads up that we pay some attention to the process here. So I appreciate that.
Great, thank you, sir. Is there any questions of Mr. Nickel before he moves away from the table?
Thank you.
Seeing none, thank you very much, sir. And I know that there's folks that are listening and taking notes, so thanks for your presentation. Is there anybody else that would like to speak this evening, either for or against this project? Seeing none, thank you, folks. It's a good public meeting, and I know that, like I said earlier, that there's people taking notes and paying attention to what's being said. So we'll look for a motion to adjourn the public meeting. Moved by Councillor Hicks, seconded by Deputy Mayor Calver. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thanks, folks. We'll give everybody an opportunity. The folks that don't want to stick around, we'll give you an opportunity to clear out. And we do have a presentation from Mr. Stevenson coming up next. So come on up, Doug, but we'll give folks an opportunity to move around here first. And we had to bring back Councillor Pennell as well. So. Just give us a couple minutes there, Doug, and we'll get you started. Yep. Yep. Go ahead, Kylie. Great. I think we've got everybody settled. So next up is a presentation from Doug Stevenson, from the Bay of Quinte Regional Marketing Board. Go ahead, Doug.
Well, thank you so much, Mayor and Council, and I know you got a busy night, so I'll get right to it. When I'm here, I'm talking about a regional partnership, and that's what enables us to succeed as an organization. We got, Brighton anchoring us over on that west side, Quinte West, City of Belleville, Mohawks of the Bay of Quinte, and of course, Greater Napanee anchoring us on the east with the Quinte Home Builders as a part of it on that resident attraction side. And we are guided and governed by a board of directors. Your own Angela Hicks right here in front of you representing us on that board. And it's been, terrific to have Angela there for discussion and also for an additional point of view with respect to Greater Napanee. Here's the team right here. I'm the person who gets to present to all the councils, but I'm only one part of this organization. And so I'm so fortunate to work every week with Anna and Trevor and Jen. And, when I speak of staff, I've also got to be sure to point out the role that Napanee staff play. And it's not just Kylie giving me advice on a microphone tonight, but between she and Annie, there's not a week that goes by probably where me or somebody from my team aren't interacting with them, asking them questions, getting information from them, and they're real assets to what we're able to do in partnership, working together. So got to say thank you to them as well. This fiscal year, April to March 2024, we're working with a budget of just over $1 million. And so, as you know yourselves, you're in for $1.55 per capita. So it's $26,162, 2.3% of the total funding. And as you know, we derive funding from multiple sources. It's not just that per capita, but it's municipal accommodation tax also. And so you'll see pretty big slice of the pie from City of Belleville there with almost $600,000 from their municipal accommodation tax and about half of our budget through the year. So what are we doing with your money? Well, we're putting it to work. And do you know, since we began this partnership in April 2021, about 2.5 years ago, we've invested over $30,000 of your funding right back into the community of Greater Napanee. So that's just about 41% of the total funding that you've provided us with since we began that partnership. So it's grants to develop tourism-related experiences in this community, marketing grants for your small businesses, product marketing supports, and also working with your Chamber of Commerce to do multiple marketing initiatives through those years. And what does that result into? It really helps drive regional economic activity. And I'll touch on this on some future slides. A lot of that is driven by overnight activity. So when we look at tourism growth, the most recent CBRE numbers, national accommodations data shows we're growing. And that's not just growth coming out of COVID. We're done with that now. We're actually growing from pre-COVID numbers as well. So we've grown about 10% since we started this partnership. We're up over last year, and we're up from pre-COVID numbers about 5%. But maybe more importantly, when we look at some of our competitors in Southeastern Ontario, so Kingston, Gananoque, Brockville, we're showing larger occupancy percentages than them. So that's us headed in the right direction. And, in the previous slide, I touched on estimated regional overnight spending. We're talking big dollars here. And so when we look at that through the course of a year, it's over $320 million, which is excellent for the local economy. So how are we doing it? Well, we're working across marketing and management tactics all through the year. So we've got almost 40 tactics that we're working across with that team I mentioned, with your own team as well. And some of this you see, most of it you don't see. I want to underscore that we are what's called a destination marketing organization. So the majority of our marketing, it's directed at people who don't live here, specifically GTA, Ottawa, Quebec, Northeastern United States. About 70% of that marketing budget is spent on those outside communities, trying to bring people in. And hey, fun fact, more Toronto users on our website than any other user group, 21%. So that means we're effectively targeting that GTA crowd because there's almost 6 million people living there that we're trying to bring here on a yearly basis. So when we talk about marketing campaigns through the previous year, and I know I've spoken to council about this before, we can actually track
those IP addresses that are clicking on or seeing our Bay of Quinte ads, and we geofence your accommodations or your attractions. And we can see when somebody clicks on our ad or sees our ad and then physically enters one of those areas, which we call conversion zones. And when we apply a spending formula to that, when we see over 32,000 physical entries into those conversion zones from people who saw Bay of Quinte marketing ads, we're estimating over $3.4 million generated just by our ad campaigns alone. Of course, we're always driving people to the website, and hopefully you've seen it. bayofquinte.ca has a new look and feel as of last week. Got all sorts of new features on there. Sorry, my clicker was going mad. Going back one more. Kylie, help me out. Up one more. No, up, up. Yeah, keep going up. Yeah, keep going up. No, we're going the wrong direction. Yes, we did it. Good teamwork. Lots of new features related to our communities. Our interactive map featuring over 700 tourism-related businesses, including those in Greater Napanee. Our events calendar that any organization or event in Greater Napanee can upload to for free. Driving content as well, telling stories about Greater Napanee small business owners and other tourism assets. And a lot of it flowed through our digital media, where we're communicating with a network of over 60,000 on a weekly basis, telling stories about Greater Napanee and showing the place off to show people what they can be experiencing when they come here. But as you know, we're not the only ones telling our story. In my most recent email to council, I was talking a lot about third-party media, earned media, and other travel writers who we're hiring in order to tell the story of this great place and what it has to offer, so that we're continuing to grow our networks with others who aren't following what we do. Taking photography and video throughout the year based on what your staff are looking for and providing that back for free. Of course, featuring the community in our discovery guide, and this year coming up, we'll be printing 30,000 copies and distributing those all across Ontario. I mentioned our marketing grants, where over the course of the 2.5-year partnership, we've sorry, folks. And of course, we've got to receive funding too. And so we were really fortunate to receive almost $150,000 from the Rural Economic Development Grant this year, which is going to help generate even more activity for us as a partnership. Go down. Well, I'm going to let you drive from now on, Kylie. Go down one. Because at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is really generate a return on marketing investment for Greater Napanee. And next slide, ultimately inject more funds of what you're contributing back into the community, so that we're working in collaboration with more organizations to generate that economic activity. Next slide. So I know that there's not a decision being made tonight. Staff are going to be bringing a report at a meeting coming up soon. But what we're respectfully requesting is to continue this partnership that we started 2.5 years ago. Because we are seeing some great success. I think staff feel the same way. And I know the partnership feels the same way, having Greater Napanee at the table. And so we're requesting a continued $1.55 per capita through the term of this council, but also 1 year into the term of the next council. And what we're saying as part of this is we will not be requesting any increase in the $1.55 per capita over the duration of that term. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Doug. And you've been very efficient with your time. So thank you for that. Does anybody have any questions for Doug? Councillor Pennell.
Thank you, Worship. Boy, I tell you, do I ever feel better about myself after listening to you? I want to get up and walk around the room or jog around the room. Thanks, Doug, for coming in here and presenting
bet.
to us. It's always a pleasure. You know, in the email that you sent out, you mentioned it too, you sent out to council, and there was some links, and I clicked on them and took the time to read those publications. Take a fall drive, the best weekend ever. Greater Napanee Fall Tour. Enjoy fall and for all its splendor in Greater Napanee. They were just very well wrote.
Oh,
The
good.
photography was great. And you know what, I'm mentioning this so that maybe people around the area can read that, take a look at that and see what you're doing to help bring in those 6 million people from Toronto or the other surrounding areas as well, which is fantastic. Might not be a shock to you. You know, it'll be a pleasure for myself to vote yes on this when that time
Terrific.
comes. I know the answer to this, and I think everybody else does, but I'd just like you to explain to it. So again, you're asking for $1.55 per capita, and you want that for the rest of the term of council for 3 more years plus 1 more year. And can you explain to us and the listening group as to why you want to extend it into the next term of council?
Yeah, certainly. Through the mayor to Councillor Pennell, I mean, at the end of the day, we are building a budget every year with this partnership that you saw there. And so part of this is really organizational and budget stability, where in order for us to prepare for a coming year or a term, we need to know who's at the table providing funding. So that's one piece. But I think at the end of the day, one of the things that we have learned, and I've been with this organization 10 years now, so I've been through a few different council cycles, is that it does take some time for members of new councils to learn about the organization and the value that we bring as partners to a community. And so the feeling is that, you know, if we're up for budget a couple of months after a new council comes in, that might not give enough time for new individuals on council to be able to get a sense of the value of the partnership in that decision-making process. So at the end of the day, it's for our benefit, but it's for the benefit of the partnership as well.
Great, thank you for that explanation.
And I should add, Councillor Pennell, that, you know, we're really fortunate. I mentioned those partners on that beginning slide. So just the way things have happened, City of Belleville, Brighton, City of Quinte West, and the Mohawks of the Bay of Quinte have all come on board on that term of partnership. $1.55 per capita through this term of council, 1 year into their next term of council. So they all approved that in April of this year based on how we worked out things.
Great, thank you.
Great, thanks, Councillor Pennell. Is there any other questions for Doug? Go ahead, Councillor Hicks.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I can only state that it is a pleasure to work with Doug and his team. They are very, very responsive, incredibly knowledgeable. And as a new counselor appointed to that board, it was a relief knowing that I was going in and there were experienced people there and I could just learn as I went. I didn't have to start anything right from scratch. So I'd like to thank the previous council for having that foresight to run it into the first term of this council. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hicks. Is there anything else? Go ahead, Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, Doug, you and I have had conversations before. It's always been a concern of some business people in the town that enough isn't done to promote the downtown core. But I think sometimes they don't realize that you're promoting all of Napanee, the wineries, the orchards, and south, and everything north of the tracks as well. So I think that's the perception that, you know, we're spending $30,000 and we're not getting enough for our money. But anyway, I think we need to make sure that everybody realizes that you are promoting all of Greater Napanee. One thing I did want to ask you, and it's another perception some people have, is that we don't promote enough east of us, like for instance, Montreal, Ottawa, in that area. Everybody, and I guess maybe it's because you're called the Quinte Marketing Board, that everybody thinks it's all west of us here that, you know, the promotion goes. And I just wonder if you could touch on what you actually do in Montreal, Ottawa, to promote Greater Napanee. Exactly what do you do to promote?
Yeah, through the mayor to Councillor Martin, it's a great question. And so, you know, as we came out of COVID and things became more possible again, we got right back into marketing and promotion in those markets. So, you know, you mentioned Quebec. Typically, we target geographically Montreal and West. And we also get into the Northeast United States. So when we talk about Quebec, what most people have probably seen is that beaches are a massive driver. So we use that to our advantage. And you might think, well, that doesn't necessarily benefit Greater Napanee, but it still does because we're driving people here with that messaging. So the majority of the marketing that would happen to that Quebec crowd is kind of twofold. One, it's digital, primarily driven through omni-channel marketing. So programmatic, paid search, enhanced social. But the other piece that we do, Trevor Norris, who was on the staff slide there, he actually goes on travel trade missions. So to events like Bienvenue Quebec, where he's meeting with actual travel operators and showing them product that we have and trips that people could take and then helping to have those trips booked. And then when we talk about the Northeast United States, we're doing those same things. And actually we have a great partnership with AAA, which most people know is kind of the CAA equivalent, where we go down and we do multiple trade shows through, especially in New York State, but also two of the main drivers for visitation in the Northeast United States for us are fishing, no surprise, and golf. And would you know that golf, we are part of a partnership called Golf in Ontario. So it's a partnership throughout the province, multiple destinations like Bay of Quinte throw money into a shared pot. And what we do is we market specifically to United States, Quebec, broader Ontario. And would you know that Bay of Quinte, we actually outsell those other destinations 2 to 1. And so we've been really, for lack of a better term, driving a lot of golf activity specifically from the United States.
Thank you, Doug. Appreciate that.
Thanks, Councillor Martin. Is there anything else for Doug? Go ahead, Councillor Shank.
Wow, Doug, like everything sounds great, but I'm always devil's advocate here. You've got these great numbers and everything else, but do you have any for you to acquire all these numbers? Do you have any numbers that are site specific of what you've done to promote town of Greater Napanee? Like you're saying you've had increases here, increases there, because you're not using Prince Edward County are you using Prince Edward County's tourism in any of your numbers?
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Shank, Prince Edward County is not in our partnership and isn't included in any of our numbers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so all I'm saying, there's no decision tonight, but what I would like to do is if you could give us, you know, not tonight, but some numbers that are reflecting the town of Greater Napanee. So the taxpayers are paying you 26,000 some odd dollars. This is what you're returning back, but what you're seeing as finding in the town of Greater Napanee.
So through the mayor to you, Councillor Shank, what you're looking for is not regional numbers, but numbers specific to only Greater Napanee.
Exactly, because I'm going to be asked by a taxpayer, all right, or numerous taxpayers are saying, okay, you're paying an individual or business of 26 to promote town of Greater Napanee. What are you getting in return?
Yeah.
And all I can do is give you the big picture, but I can't give you site specific towards Greater Napanee. So what I would like to do is see the numbers for the town of Greater Napanee, because it's all great pixie dust, but I want to just make sure that, you know, what we're actually getting.
Through the mayor to Councillor Shank, just one more time. So would you be hoping for this to be included in the staff report for your upcoming council meeting?
Yeah, I'd like to see it in the staff report through Annie. All right, that for budget purposes, and I can say, okay, does this warrant it or does it not? Because I still have to deliberate of tying the next council's hands, whoever gets elected, all right, of what, so I'll have to still think about that one. So
Sure.
all I'm saying is there some things I agree with what you've done and some things I'm gonna have to think about a little bit longer.
Yeah.
But if I have those numbers, then I'll be able to understand it a little bit better.
Certainly.
Thanks, Councillor Shank. Now, I know we're anticipating Annie bringing a back report on the 28th of November. Is that sufficient time for you, Doug, to put some numbers together?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'll leave it with you to be in contact with Annie then. Thanks. Is there anything else? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Calver.
Yeah, Doug and I spoke, I guess, last week and educated me greatly. I was just looking at the numbers here. So you put, since April of 2021, there's been $30,000 go back into Napanee. Is that correct? So 15,000 grants, that's so on and so forth.
That's correct.
So $30,000 since April 21 back in directly to Napanee. Okay, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Is there any other questions or comments for Doug before we let him go? Seeing none, we'll look for a motion to note and receive the presentation of Doug Stevenson with respect to the Quinte Regional Marketing Board. Moved by Councillor Pennell, second by Councillor Hicks. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you, Doug.
Thanks for your time.
We'll look forward to the report on the 28th. So,
You bet.
thank you.
Thanks.
We'll give you a few minutes to, I can't imagine you're probably on your way out. So we'll see if we need to spend a little time and see if we need to bring any more people in. Go ahead, Annie. No, I guess I've been advised that we're good to go here. So we can move on to the next portion of our agenda. Deputations, scheduled deputations with respect to new items. I don't see any on our agenda, and I'm correct in that statement, am I, Madam Clerk? Great. Next up is deputation items on the agenda, and we do have a number of deputations this evening. What we're hoping to do is we're going to provide everybody 5 minutes, but we're going to be extremely tight on the 5-minute presentation time. There may be some questions from council afterwards, but Madam Clerk is going to set her timer. I sometimes lose track of time, but she's going to keep me online tonight. So we're going to keep it to 5 minutes. All I ask is, and I know that sometimes these discussions can be somewhat passionate, but I just ask that everybody be respectful this evening. We want to hear what everybody has to say, but I would just ask that everybody be respectful with respect to their presentation. So up first, we have Howard Hill, proposed battery energy storage project, Boralex, item 10.1 on our agenda. Is Howard here? Yep. Come on up, Howard, and we'll get you a seat at the front table here. And as I have said earlier this evening, I'd ask that you speak into the microphone. We can hear you very clearly here without the microphone, but there's the folks at home that want to hear you as well. So we'll get Madam Clerk to start the clock whenever she's ready, and you're more than welcome to go. So,
okay. Hi, thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. I passed in some paperwork earlier on. I suppose you received our neighborhood petition. I only know I got 38 signatures on there. Doesn't seem like a lot, but that is from Sandhurst to County Road 21, from County Road 8 down to Dump Road, back down and around. So basically in that area there, I missed approximately 13 houses. Some people were home and chose not to sign. They did indicate that they were against the Boralex battery facility. I won't take up too much time, I guess, because you got my binder as well.
Yeah, and thanks you for bringing up any of the information that has been submitted to us, has been submitted to all members of council. So we appreciate that. So we did get it. So
all right, thanks. Okay, so I'll skip right to it then. There's a distance of 230 feet between our driveway and the entranceway where they want to go. Brian's driveway, the entrance is 25 feet wide. The road width is 24 feet wide. The average length of a tractor trailer is 73 feet in length. That's if it's a short wheelbase tractor. The average wheelbase tractor is 244 inches, which would extend it to 75 feet in length. So that makes it an impossibility to turn into that property off of Highway 33. You're going to need at least 250 feet of oncoming traffic to make that turn into that driveway. That's so now just past that to the west towards the ferry, there's a blind corner. That's 0.3 of a kilometer from that blind corner to the entrance. So in a perfect world, everybody would be doing 80 kilometers an hour, which will allow them about 4.5 seconds to stop. But this is the Autobahn, Highway 33, and you got ferry dumps. So that would give you about 3 seconds of stopping time from the time you come around that corner if there was a truck in the oncoming lane to make that turn. So, and it is zoned, from what I understand, commercial. It's gone from being a bird sanctuary when we bought the place 7 years ago to him being able to sever off 10 acres of property and now wanting to go with an industrialized battery storage. It's if you look at County Road 21, if you look at OPG, you look at the new gas plant, you look at Lafarge, you look at County Road 4, they all have a runway, a turn lane of not less than 330 feet for a slowdown to make the turn. And at that point, you still can't make a 90-degree turn. It has to go in on a 45, which Brian sold to a family on the GTA, I believe. But he's indicated that he's going to buy it back to get this to go through because he's taken the path of least resistance, as what he said to me. So he says there's only two people that can oppose this. One is the people that own the property. Two is my wife and myself. So, yeah, I think that's about it, really. You have all my paperwork.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I just, it's a safety concern. I think if you were gonna go ahead and do this, if you were looking at County Road 8, that's a long stretch. It'd be an inconvenience for Brian because of his business, but it's almost like I don't want to say he doesn't care about the inconvenience of others, but that's really what it boils down to. This is big money. This is not a provincial thing. This is a privately owned company that's still going to have to hook into the gas plant. They're going to buy at a reduced price. They're going to sell it at an inflated price. So it's not, it's just for profit business, unlike Altura, which is a provincial thing. So their profits are going to actually go back into the pockets of the province to sort of help with taxes. So this is what I think this is uncalled for. I don't think there's any need for the two of them. This is a private one and that's a provincial one. So yeah, I don't know. You'd have to put in a turning lane, I guess, for safety reasons on 33 highway.
Okay, thanks, Howard.
Alrighty.
Thank you. Is there, I guess we've hit our time, so you've timed it perfectly. Does anybody on council have any questions of Howard before he leaves the desk there? Seeing none, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you for your time.
We appreciate that. Thank you. Next up, we will have Marnie Dawson on behalf of Boralex, and Marnie is here in the body of the council chamber. So come on up and thank you, ma'am. And as you heard, we're on some very strict timelines, so we're going to try and keep this to 5 minutes, and Madam Clerk's going to keep me online here. So whenever you're ready, you're more than welcome to start.
Great. Thank you very much for having us here tonight, Mayor and Council staff. We're here tonight to really answer any questions that you may have. We feel like we have demonstrated our commitment to the township through our Community Vibrancy Fund, as well as addressing concerns that have come out of our open house. For example, we have increased a setback from a property line based on concerns that were raised by stakeholders in our open house. And we are aware of Mr. Hill's concerns and are working with have contacted the MTO and are also would be working with our construction staff on what to do during that time period to ensure safety mechanisms are in place. We feel like we have cited this project well, considering that we are way over 1 kilometer from the nearest residence. We worked very hard with our landowner to come to an agreement that benefited both him and ourselves for this project, and also made commitments to return the land back to the status that he wants it in at the end of the project. We are asking for support tonight as a municipal resolution to support the project for rated criteria points, not for full approval of the project. We will be working with council, county staff on getting all the necessary permits and approvals at the time we win, if we do win contract award.
Great. Thank you, Marnie. Does anybody have any, go ahead, Councillor Pennell. Then we'll go to the Deputy Mayor Calver.
Through your worship, thank you. Thanks for coming in and talking with us again. Just a quick question. Can your contract, if you're awarded the contract, can your contract be sold prior or during the operation of prior or during the operation of the battery storage?
So first, Boralex is long-term owners and operators of projects, but we would have to get approval from the ISO to transfer our contract. But yes, it can be done.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pennell. Deputy Mayor Calver.
Through your worship. So you're just looking for approval to continue going forward. If you were then granted the contract, there would still be a lot more hoops to jump through as far as ministry, noise, setbacks, so on and so forth. So tonight you're just looking for an approval to continue forward.
That's correct. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Calver. Is there any other questions for Marnie? Seeing none, I've just got one quick one. With respect to Boralex, this isn't your first project. You have more than one. It isn't your first project. I'll let you expand on that. Go ahead.
That's correct. So in the first procurement that the ISO held, the expedited long-term procurement, we put in 2 projects and were awarded both projects. So that's the Tilbury project, which is an 80 megawatt project, and the Hagersville project, which is a 300 megawatt project. And so we are working through the development process with those projects, trying to get all the necessary permits and approvals in order to actually build and then ultimately operate those projects. And then for this round, we are also looking at other projects that we may put forward into the RFP as well.
Great, thank you. Was there any other comments or questions from my question?
Just a slight clarification on my part. I think Marnie said the setback is way over a kilometer. I think it's about a kilometer, just to make that clarification. Just want that on record. 1.2.
Yeah, great, 1.2. Great, thank you. Is there any other questions or comments for these folks before we let them get away from the table? Go ahead, Councillor Hicks.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Just one question. Refresh my memory on the completion date. Should you be awarded?
Should we be awarded, if we get all approvals, we would hope to be operational in 2027 timeframe.
Yeah, it could be as early as 2026, but yeah.
That's
subject to all necessary approvals.
Yeah.
Great, thanks, Councillor Hicks. Is there anything else? Seeing none. Thank you, folks. Much appreciated, and thank you for coming this evening. So
thank you.
Next up, we will have Michael Stockfish, proposed battery energy storage project, EDF Renewables. And there's Michael. Welcome, sir. I think you've probably heard the rules of engagement. So
and I apologize in advance, but I will use my full 5 minutes.
No, you're more than welcome to do that. And but we'll put the timer on, and when you hear the beep, then we'll cut you off, but we may have some questions after that. So whenever you're ready, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you very much for the opportunity to make a deputation specific to the EDF BEST project on proposed for County Road 9. My wife, Robin, and I, we own a house located at 2069 County Road 9. To start, I'd like to say that we have had overwhelming concern expressed by local residents with signatures and emails from 103 households that have 235 people living in them. And they supported our public notice letter opposing this particular proposal. This was done by knocking on doors and word of mouth, and I'm convinced we've only scratched the surface, given people who weren't home and are not around. And I'd also like to say that I understand the role of battery storage facilities have in the broader provincial energy strategy. Having said that, the County Road 9 site is not an appropriate site for such a facility. So the following, I'll give just a very brief overview of sort of what I think are the criteria that I would be looking at in terms of making the assessment. And I've broken down to 4 criteria. One is financial. And from my vantage point, there's really a nominal financial benefit to the town of Greater Napanee. And it's similar to the other proposals that have been put forth. There's a small increase in property taxes, estimated between $3,000 to $4,000 based on staff report. That's about a third of a year's property tax is for a single family home down in that area. And then there's a commitment of up to $250,000 annually to a community benefit fund. And I stress the up to, because the formula wasn't really very clear in terms of what that would translate into and what it would mean to get to that level. All other financial benefits accruing from this project will flow exclusively to the property owner and EDF. There will be cost to the town and or the county in terms of road repairs after the construction is completed. There will be an impact in terms of the cost in preparing for and in the event of a fire for the uniqueness of the lithium ion battery fires, which I'm sure others will talk about a little bit later. Placing this facility on the proposed site would, in my view, negatively impact people's willingness to build new homes in that area, which would have a negative impact on future revenue flows for the town in terms of property taxes, development costs, things of that nature. So the second criteria is the impact on employment. There will be no permanent jobs created by this project. There would be a limited number of temporary construction jobs, and it's not clear that they would be filled by residents versus non-residents. The third criteria is the impact on constituents. The land is privately owned and currently zoned as agriculture and residential, not industrial. And I know there is, in the current bylaws, the public use. I think one could challenge whether this is public use for land. I think whenever I think about public use, it'd be for parks, nature trails, things of that nature, not a 10-acre battery farm. In terms of the town has been approving severing lots out on County Road 9, and it's become a very exclusive place to live, a very desirable place. The question I would ask is, what message is the council giving to those who have built houses out in that area, or those who are thinking of building houses in the future if you put a facility like this in their backyard? If supported by council and approved by IESO, the project would negatively impact residents in a meaningful way in the immediate area. And they would include noise and light concerns. I know there will be studies done on that. A fire or a leakage would impact groundwater tables, wells, and ultimately quality of water in the Bay of Quinte. The area is known for its world-class walleye fishing and attracts a significant number of tourists. There are many who hunt recreationally in that area as well. And again, my question would be, why would you want to risk that in any way? There's a risk to property values, and I know there's no studies, but I look at the common sense piece of it, which is if you had a choice between buying a home that was near the facility or not, you would choose not to. And I think all you have to do is look at the case of homes situated near power lines, highways, railway tracks, and clearly they have a lower value because of being close to those locations. And I think it'd be the same here. There's an increase to higher home prices. And I did include in my written deputation a link to a study by or a report by Travelers Insurance, which talks about best projects specifically. So I would encourage you to take a look at that. And then finally, there's the commitment to the provincial energy strategy. And the town of Greater Napanee is home to, oh boy.
Boy, you're doing good. You got pretty near to the end, so.
I didn't get close to the end. Anyways, there's just two quick points I could make.
Yeah, no, my clerk is going to get really mad at me if we don't move on. So we do have a copy of your information, I believe, what you've sent in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the floor to council to see if they have any questions with respect to your presentation. But thank you.
Make a closing remark.
You may be able to interpret it into the question, but we're going to open up the floor to council. So does council have any questions or comments? Go ahead, Councilor Purnell.
Your worship, I have a question, an order question for you. Could I ask him exactly what the very next point was?
Okay, you're more than welcome to. Councilor Purnell, you can ask whatever questions you want. So go ahead.
So your worship, Michael, could you please give me the very next point that you were going to make, and I would not probably make it very long. Thanks.
I appreciate that, and it's the commitment that Napanee's already made to the energy capacity to Ontario, and I did a quick back of the envelope calculation. Napanee's population accounts for 0.1% of the population of Ontario, 0.1%. And if you approve the 250 megawatts, it would account for 16% of what the province is looking to generate in this round of battery capacity. To me, I think Napanee has done more than their fair share to make that contribution. And the final piece of that is But if you are going to make an investment of another 250 million or 250, that this is not the right place for it, given the direct impact on all of the local constituents that live in that area.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Pennell. Is there any other questions or comments? Go ahead, Councillor Shank.
My question is for the fire chief. Is that all right?
We were not going to get into that, but we'd like to stick to questions of the presentator if we
It's
can.
just that he had mentioned it, and I imagine other people are going to mention about the concern of fire. All right. Now, I've already heard, the concerns of fire, but the chief is very knowledgeable in,
So there's another speaker.
I'm just,
Olivier,
I'm asking the mayor.
Yeah, we were going to try and stay away from that, and I don't want to put the fire chief on the spot unless the fire chief has a very, yeah, go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Through your worship, just procedurally, it is not intended for this to become a debate between staff and residents. So there's a clear line. You can ask all the questions of staff under 10.1234 under the staff reports, and the fire chief is expecting those questions, I believe, to come forward at that point.
I'll have to wait for
Very
point to that.
Very good. Thanks, Madam Clerk. So is there any other questions for Michael before he gets up away from the desk?
And I will leave my speaking notes because there's some additional information in here that wasn't part of the broader deputation.
Great, thank you. If you want to leave them, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you, Michael. Next up, we have Dean Pope, proposed battery energy storage project by EDF Renewables. Come on up, Dean. I think you know the procedure and you know the time limits. So and again, we just ask you to speak into the microphone if you can, just so that the folks at home can hear that. So.
A lot of the points that I put in my deposition mirror what Mike just went through, so there's no reason to take counsel through them again. I just want to make a couple of points. One is I am not personally opposed to the notion of BESS. I mean, it is something that's part of our future and so on. My simple issue is location. I mean, and we can all sit up here and cite chapter and verse about communities and so on and so forth. But the fact of the matter is what we're talking about is in putting an industrial application that's fire prone into a rural area that's a good distance away from emergency services. And I don't think that that's very practical. The other thing that I think that is if it were possible, that is that there are more appropriate locations, perhaps closer to town, closer to emergency services and so on, in the event of fire. Perhaps even the town owns a property. And I guess my question is, why should the benefits of a proposition like this flow to one person instead of the entire community? And I mean financial benefits. Town had property, you would be enjoying the revenues from this transaction, and it would go directly towards the coffers of the city and so on. And so I would just urge the council to give some additional consideration to, from my perspective, just location. That's it.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. Just hang tight and we'll see if council has any questions for you, Dean.
Okay, sure.
Does council have any questions for Dean with respect to his presentation? I don't see any. Thank you very much, sir. Much appreciated. Next up, we have Olivier St. Cyr, proposed battery energy storage project, EDF Renewables. Olivier? Oh, he's remote. Yeah, I do see that. He's
yes, you can hear me, right?
Yep, sir, we can hear you. Thank you very much. We'll give you the floor. I know you're not here this evening, but we're going to keep everything to a strict 5 minutes. Yep. And then after that, there may be some questions of council. So, and we'll let you know. We've got the timer going. We'll let you know when you get to that 5 minute time. So go ahead, sir, whenever you're ready.
Thank you so much. My name is Olivier St. Cyr. I'm a property owner of 22161 County Road 9. I'm an associate professor at the University of Toronto. My expertise is in human factors engineering, which is concerned with the safety of industrial system. Before joining the university, I worked for Atomic Energy of Canada Limited and Kinetrix in the nuclear industry. And I worked on projects for Ontario Power Generation, Bruce Power, and Pointe Lepreau Generating Station in New Brunswick. So I'm quite familiar with generating station and energy system. Next slide, please. My position today is that this site is not suitable, not because it's not a good technology, but because it's not a suitable site with respect to its location. There are several safety concerns with BESS sites that needs to be taken into account. And I'm about to outline some of these concerns next. So we'll go to the next slide. Follow up to Mr. Gavin Ross' deputation that he presented to Town Council on October the 10th. There is a database of BESS failure event on the internet, which is fairly easy to locate. Now, this database has logged in over 68 failures of BESS system in the past since 2011, and 11 of those 68 failures are actually just from January 2023 to now. So obviously, this is still a technology that we're trying to figure out, that is growing, and that is, being fine-tuned as we go through. Next slide. One of the main risks for BESS system is definitely fire and explosions due to the lithium-ion batteries, which are prone to catch on fires. Let's just be honest here. There's tons of information about that. Now, the Journal of Loss Prevention and Process Industry has actually published an article in 2021 outlining that there are two types of main fire and explosion: flammable gas explosion and electrical arc explosions, and for which BESS facilities are very prone. These obviously release chemical toxic fuel in the environment through soil contamination or air contamination. Next slide. There's also the Journal of Safety Process that talks about flammable hazards in BESS system and lithium battery storage units. So, and this is actually one of the highest concerns that we have with the site location for us, the resident of this neighborhood. Next slide. One of the most BESS explosion incidents that is often cited in the literature is the Surprise, Arizona explosion, which happened in 2019, which was part of the Arizona Public Service McKinnon Energy Storage Facility, which is about 45 kilometers northwest of Phoenix. And you can see some of the pictures here, and you can see these are the facilities on fires. And they kind of emit these like white smoke on the ground, which is quite unusual compared to some other fires that people may have seen or may have think of when they hear the word fire. Next slide. This is especially important, this event, because 4 firefighters were injured from this accident. And you can see here pictures of the firefighters opening the doors to the BESS facilities. You can see some of the debris leftovers from the explosion. And I want to note here that these firefighters were highly trained to deal with specialized hazardous material. So we're not talking about your average firefighters here. Next slide. There are many, many others that I could cite here if I had more time. So there's incidents from New York, from Korea, from California, et cetera, et cetera. Next slide. So the small amount of research that I just outlined shows that there's potential risk. First of all, the fire station, as pointed out by other people, is about 12 to 15 minutes from town. Where is the constant water source that will be needed to put these fire up? And I hope the answer is not the Bay of Quinte. How can we ensure that the site is fully accessible under all weather condition? And how do we assess the risk in the airborne contamination and the soil contamination? Next slide. Soil contamination is a particular issue. I had a video here to show that there's a significant amount of water that runs off from this proposed site all the way to the Bay of Quinte every spring from the snow melt. And this is, by the way, a body of water that is shared by the Indigenous Mohawk community. And we don't know whether these folks have been consulted or not. At least I could not find any information about this.
Okay, thank you, sir. We've reached our 5 minutes. If you could just
I have one more slide, but that's okay.
No, yeah,
thank you so much.
We're going to put the questions out from council. So if you can just stay on the line there,
of course,
and we'll see if council has any questions for you with respect to this
Absolutely.
presentation.
Thank you so much.
Does anybody have any questions with respect to this presentation? Seeing none. Thank you, sir. We have no questions for you. Thank you for your presentation. And oh, there you are. Thank you for your presentation and spending the time with us this evening.
Thank you so much. Okay, bye-bye.
Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Bye.
Next up, we have Ian Morrison, proposed battery storage, energy storage project by EDF Renewables. And I believe Ian is, oh, there's Ian there. So come on up, sir. You know the routine, I think probably by now, if you could speak into the microphone, and we're going to give you your 5 minutes whenever you're ready, and you have the floor.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, councilors, and fellow residents. I'm new to Napanee, and I love it here. I'm a Canadian. I was born in Ottawa. I've spent the last 20 years in the United States, and I returned May 5th to care for my younger brother. He passed on October the 19th, and I've elected to stay in the property. The property is at 2195 County Road 9. I've met very few people in Napanee, so here's a little bit of background on who I am. At the University of Toronto, I studied neurophysiology and did research for a few years. And then at the end of that, for the next 35 years, I've been a senior executive in advertising and marketing with the titles of VP, President, Director of Marketing, Chief Marketing Officer, and Chief Operating Officer. 3 weeks ago, I knew nothing about BES, knew nothing about any of this. And then one of my neighbors pointed out to me that this thing was going in about 1 kilometer away from where I live. So I researched it online. I arrived at two conclusions. We need BES systems in the province to serve the needs for the future. There's no question about that at all. And building a 10-acre BES in the middle of prime farmlands is ill-advised. During my 35 years as a senior executive, one of my tasks was to help companies avoid making that one big mistake that could jeopardize their existence. And I was very good at doing that. The proposed BES on farmland is such a mistake. From January to July of this year, 6 similar installations caught fire. And according to Professor St. Cyr, another 5. They injured the firefighters and in some cases required 4 days of massive amounts of water to put them out completely. Foam doesn't work. It causes an explosion when mixed with toxic fumes from the fire. The proposed site sits roughly 1 kilometer upslope from the Bay of Quinte. Gravity works. In 4 days of pumping water onto the installation, groundwater, it'll run straight down the water right into the Bay of Quinte, and the lake will end up being contaminated. And to put a cherry on top, monitoring of the site will be done from San Diego. You can't go any further away from Napanee and still remain in the lower 48 states. Okay, I did a straight line. It's like 3,600 kilometers as the crow flies. So let's say one of the tools that I used when I was trying to get companies to not make the one big mistake was I'd say visualize. And here's what I do. Let's say that 3 days ago, the BES in the farmer's field experienced thermal runaway. For 3 days, fire crews have been fully engaged in putting it out. The thick, dense fog that Professor St. Cyr showed you blankets a large area. People have been evacuated from their homes, and the runoff is visible as it runs into the bay by anyone who will look at it. And yes, on TV, it's reported as an ecological disaster on prime farmland in Napanee at the 10-acre site of a 250 megawatt battery storage system. If you live in Napanee and your mailing address contains Napanee, it happened to you. It's not just the people on County Road 9. House prices will decline. If you try to sell, you could be required to disclose the best location, and your insurance will most likely go up. So who's going to take care of this mess? They will, okay? And I mean that. The first call will be to the lawyers. It won't be to any cleanup crews. And they'll spend the next 5 to 7 years trying to pin the blame and costs on anybody else but them. You won't see a dime until it's all settled and probably appealed. Instead, if we in Napanee build it at the generating plant, they have the manpower on site, the equipment and the expertise. And if it blows there, the TV won't be talking about an ecological disaster on farmland. You'll still be able to sell your corn and your soy and whatever else grows in Napanee. My recommendation to the council is to steer clear of the minefield, do the smart thing, and veto the Bethany BES project. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, sir. If you just want to hang tight, we'll see if council has any questions for you. So does council have any questions for the presenter? Seeing none. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your time and for attending tonight. Moving on, we will listen to Martha Downey, proposed battery energy storage product, EDF Renewables. Martha, there she is. Yep, come on up. And I think you probably know the rules of engagement here. So whenever you're ready, just let us know and the floor will be yours. And we'll give you your 5 minutes and then there may be some questions afterwards. So go ahead. And I'll just remind you to speak into the speaker because we've probably got a bunch of people at home that want to hear what you have to say. So we can hear you very well. It's just the folks at home we want to kind of be mindful of. So go ahead whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mayor Richardson and Council, for the opportunity to briefly speak to this motion for support for the proposed Bethany battery energy storage system and explain why ecological and human context should lead this council to withhold support for this proposal. Respectfully, this context was inadequately considered in the staff report, which thus too hastily recommends council's granting of this motion. Energy is a complex, specialized subject. Now, council has before it and on the record the benefit of Dr. Olivier Sincere's extraordinary engineering expertise, exactly on point, and Mr. Stockfish's years of expertise in critical public sector decision-making. Please carefully read their compelling deputations. The interested parties are the IESO, established and mandated under provincial legislation, which has invited proposals, the corporation RDF Renewables pursuing financial profit, an individual private landowner pursuing financial gain, crucially, the rapidly growing surrounding rural community, which might or might not benefit in some unknown degree from money purportedly to be donated by RDF, presumably to the town of Greater Napanee at large. This adjacent community would bear the real ongoing risk of serious, irreversible, potentially devastating harm to lives and homes from construction throughout the life of the project and long after any usefulness. My husband Cecil Leonard and I and our handicapped daughter Heather Ann have lived for the past 22 years in our home on Sherman's Point on Long Reach. Sherman's Point includes Sherman's Point Road, Bayview Drive, Boat Ramp Road, and Elliott's Lane, all barely 8 kilometers south of Bethany, largely all lined with residential lots occupied by homes. The proposed Bethany location and adjacent community lies south of the town of Napanee, embraced by the Bay of Quinte, Prince Edward County, Long Reach, Hay Bay, and Adolphus Reach. The environment is rare, shrinking, and vulnerable, an extraordinary combination of productive agricultural land, forests, and meadows sustaining songbirds, owls, falcons, hawks, ospreys, couple of bald eagles, wild turkeys, deer, coyotes, foxes, raccoons, porcupines, rabbits, etc. The freshwater waterway, Napanee River and Bay of Quinte flowing into Long Reach and thence into Hay Bay, Picton Bay, and Adolphus Reach, is one of the most remarkable in the world. Its deep waters internationally famous for pickerel and bass and other fish. Its shallower areas and marshes sustaining swans, herons, kingfishers, numerous species of ducks, Canada geese, frogs, water snakes, and so on. Alongside the wildlife is the interaction of land and water with air quality. This small geographical area already hosts 2 cement plants on its periphery, Bath and Picton, a large quarry on the south shore of Hay Bay, at least 1 very large solar panel, Little Creek, and no less than 2 generating stations. The IESO and our own municipal council have a duty to understand and preserve this ecological environment and protect the interests of the people respectfully living in and caring for it, even in the face of political or corporate expediency, the financial aspirations of one landowner, or nebulous inducements such as community donations. Numerous obvious hazards in locating a battery energy storage system in this particular location include unacceptably high risk of a complex fire, with that fire becoming rapidly widespread and out of control. The proposed Bethany location is about halfway down and in the interior of a peninsula extending between Long Reach and Hay Bay to Sherman's Point. High winds are prevalent, periods of drought are often lengthy, there's limited road access for firefighters and no way for residents to leave the area except by County Road 9 along Long Reach or Hay Bay. Who is liable for damage? On 18th of May this year, CBC reported that Energy Minister Todd Smith made it clear that any project should have clear support from the council and that the community would host the facility willingly. The record of this meeting, especially including communications from many persons opposed, will show overwhelmingly that the affected community would not host the proposed facility willingly. Council must heed the lessons of horrific devastation brought by Ontario's recent wildfires, the permanency of air, soil, and water pollution, even the shameful example of proposed GTA Greenbelt development. No need exists for this particular project in this particular location, which can justify its ecological and human consequences. The opposite is true.
Oh, sorry. Thanks, Martha. We've got to our time limit here. If you just want to hang tight, we'll see if council has any further questions of your deputation or your presentation. Does council have any further questions or any comments with respect to Martha's presentation? Seeing none, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
And I do have the notes.
Okay, if you want to, if we haven't got them, you're more than welcome to leave them with us. Yeah, if you just drop them off, Kylie. Thank you very much. Next up, we have William Colucci on behalf of EDF Renewables proposed battery energy storage project. William, there you are. Come on up, William. Yeah, and you've been here since we started, so you know the rules of engagement, the time limits, and you're more than welcome whenever you're ready to start.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mayor Richardson and Council, for letting me speak tonight. I understand the concerns being felt by those speaking tonight and about the proposed energy storage project. And so I want to provide some important information. I'd like to start by thanking those who have spoken tonight. Everyone has spoken, who has acknowledged the need for these projects and understands that we're proposing this site in response to the call for the projects from the ISO and the Ontario government, as opposed to some individual effort for us to take money from the province. As stated by the ISO, energy storage is a well-positioned technology to help support the electricity needs, providing a reliable and flexible form of electricity supply that can underpin the energy transformation of the future. Second, I'd like to speak about the experience of EDF Renewables. EDF Renewables operates in 22 countries around the world, developing, owning, and operating energy projects in a variety of different communities and environments. This includes about 16 gigawatts of projects developed in North America alone. As a developer, owner, and operator of one of the largest renewable energy portfolios on the continent, our history of innovation and deep experience developing and operating renewable energy assets enables us to bring a full suite of solutions to these types of projects. Our strong internal capabilities, as well as the capabilities of industry-leading experts, provide maximal efficiency and end-to-end oversight of all of our energy projects. One of our biggest strengths is in the operations and maintenance of energy projects, being one of the largest operations and maintenance companies in the space. Again, through our vast experience and through continued consultation with the fire department, city staff, and other key stakeholders, we develop detailed operations and maintenance plans, as well as emergency preparedness plans as standard practice for all of our projects that address all of the concerns earlier mentioned. In addition, there's a full suite of environmental surveys and reports that need to be completed and approved prior to any construction of this site. These surveys and reports will address all the environmental and safety concerns mentioned during the previous deputations, as well as in the notes that they provide. I understand that there are valid concerns toward the project and this technology. This project is still in its very early stages, and we're committed to addressing all of these concerns. If this project was ever awarded a contract with the ISO, it would not be in operation for another 5 years. We're looking to come into operation in the year 2028. From now until then and well beyond, we will continue with our consultation with the community, as well as with the fire department, who remains in support of the project, and city staff to ensure that the project is designed, built, and operated to the highest of standards. To close, I want to stress that tonight's resolution does not provide any site-specific approvals or permits, nor does it allow us to construct this project. The resolution allows us to continue to review the project in more detail with city staff, and we'll continue our consultation with the local community to ensure that they're well informed about the project and how we were responding to their concerns. Furthermore, I'm happy to say at this time, and we can confirm that our proposal would incorporate the recommendations by Mr. Stockfish in his written deputation. He didn't have a chance to mention them. That include a risk assessment to be conducted by a third party paid for by the proponent ourselves, a comprehensive security plan, a comprehensive fire plan, an environmental study and remediation plan, a study of noise and light pollution from the facility, a formal environmental assessment on all aspects of the project, including impacts on wildlife, and consultation with local Indigenous communities. And I can mention that, we're looking to partner with a First Nation group right now. We're just working on the details that I'm happy to share that information when the time comes. As well, we would expand that further and include road use agreements, traffic management plans, all those extra surveys to make sure that council was comfortable with our proposed project. As well, we received feedback at our open house about our community benefit fund, which is $1,000 per megawatt, which is why, that up to question by Mr. Stockfish, it relates to the project size. And we got a lot of feedback that CBF, that community benefit fund, won't be felt by the local community. So we're offering as well a $10,000 per year scholarship for local students and $20,000 a year for local environmental and recreation projects for grassroots organizations on top of that community benefit fund. We'll include these recommendations in our proposal regardless of any formal mandate from council to the ISO. As always, I remain available tonight and going forward to speak with anyone who has questions or thoughts on the project, and I plan on responding personally to all those that submitted deputation requests tonight. Thank you.
Great, thank you, William. Just hang tight and we'll see if, does council have any questions with respect to Williams? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Calver.
Thank you, Your Worship. William, can you go into some detail as to what makes this project safer than all the other projects when you do some research and stuff on the internet? I realize we've got a lot of different safety measures and stuff, but I'd like you to just kind of go into a little detail on that if you could.
Sure. Yeah. And I think it's important to note that, there's hundreds and hundreds of these projects in operation around the world. And, the ones you hear about are the ones that have incidences. Those are the ones that make news headlines. Something that's important to consider is, EDF being a large company, having great connections with manufacturers, we're able to select tier one, manufacturers of equipment, those that have the highest safety standards and safety, rates to date. And we have a dedicated procurement team that solely focuses on the selection of the best equipment available. As well, our biggest strength is in operation and maintenance. We develop operation and maintenance plans for our projects as well as a lot of our competitor projects. And those include, ensuring easy access to the project all times of the year. It includes proper training with fire departments, both before project construction as well as annual trainings to make sure that they're up to date with the current standards and the best practices. So just leveraging EDF's ability to find the best equipment to design the site most appropriately, whether that's increasing spacing between containers, including water on site, any sort of design elements that ensure the safety of the projects. We were able to put our knowledge into place for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Calvert. Councillor Shank, then we'll go to Councillor Pennell.
I'd just like to know, after listening to some of the deputations, so you're 12 to 15 minutes away from Napanee. So at a previous, you had mentioned, at a previous meeting, you had mentioned that there's going to be nobody at site if it's up and running. It's all going to be monitored, electronically, and like somebody said, San Diego. Is that correct?
So we do have a control center in San Diego that monitors our projects 24 hours a day, 365, but we also are having 1 to 2 permanent jobs. These would be a sort of site manager, maybe a site technician as well. So we would have someone, preferably, hired locally. We don't have that position filled yet, but we would have 1 to 2 full-time jobs for the operation of the project as well.
Go ahead, Councillor Shank.
So I'm just being the devil's advocate. I'm a landowner, live fairly close. There's nobody on site. You're 12 to 15 minutes out. You have to rely on the OPP. Fire department's 15 minutes out and nobody's there. So somebody does some damage. There's a lot of hunting in that area. A 303 or a bullet goes through one of your units, causes a fire, and you have nobody on site to deal with the problem at hand. So that's what with communication. So I'm going to get somebody from Pakistan that will relay it back down to San Diego to somebody somewhere else. So you understand where my concern is. I'm not in your business, but I'm trying to understand what their maybe concerns are also. And I'd like to know how you're going to address those concerns.
Sure. And I appreciate that concern. EDF has a very high success rate, and, safety rate, and I'm happy to share those safety numbers with you. Part of our lease agreement with the landowner is for them to stay aware of the project and to be on site and not to, be there personally monitoring the site, but to respond to anything that they might see in terms of sabotage or people trespassing on site. As well, we do have that site technician that will be in the area and addressing the site. They won't be there 24 hours a day, but they will be around to help respond. But again, EDF, we monitor thousands of projects. We have a very high success rate in terms of maintaining our sites and ensuring the safety of our projects. It's obviously a key component of our business as well, and one of our core values at EDF.
Great, thanks. I think Councillor Pennell has a question as well.
Thank you, Worship, through you. William, thank you very much for coming in here today. I have two questions for you. One is, same question as earlier. Prior to and during your operation, can your contract be sold if you're awarded it?
Potentially, if we were given approvals, though EDF were a long-term operator, we are usually the ones that would be offered projects from other competitors. So it's not really in our business, but technically it's possible.
Okay, thank you. And my next question is, other than the high voltage tension line, power lines that run prior to, or through this property or very near to it, why this location other than those lines?
So we like this project location. The site itself is located about a kilometer away from the nearest home. And so we felt that the project would be well situated due to, no impact in terms of noise, view shed. No one will be able to see the project or hear the project. There's a lot of land there that provides flexibility for the project, so that if we did need to move it for whatever reason during our review process with city staff and the province, we have that ability. The transmission line is certainly a part of that, but we like the space due to its enclosure separated from any nearby homes, and nearby there's no permanent trails through that area. So we felt that it was a good area that was set away from homes, from people, but still within the abilities of response if needed, and that will all be sort of shared through our response plans and emergency preparedness plans.
Just as a follow-up, Your Worship.
Go ahead, Councillor Pennell.
Thank you. When you say that that there's no proximity to homes, you're a kilometer away, that sort of thing. Your other sites, are they similar to this?
Yes, we have sites that are similar to this. We have some that are actually closer to homes and infrastructure. This one is relatively far set back compared to other projects that we've seen and other projects we've developed. For example, we have a project in Chicago that's in an urban setting that's quite close to homes, and we have had no incidents at that site.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Pennell. Councillor Hicks.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Hi, William. Thanks for coming. I do have a question. So of all the reading that I've done, and my eyes are close to bleeding now, where are you going to get the water? So safety record notwithstanding, if there is a fire, you're at the top of a hill that runs straight into the Bay of Quinte. Where are you going to get the water? Because as good as our fire department is, they cannot conjure water out of thin air. And their tanker trucks are only tanker trucks. So how do you address that?
I don't want to give any specific answers. That solution needs to be discussed with consultation with the fire department. And, we would be working with them on making sure that they have all the necessary equipment to respond to an incident. When I spoke with the fire chief, they told me, they are in the business of moving water. And so we will take their expertise and their advice, as well as, industry leading advice on the best ways to make sure there is adequate water on site, whether it's providing it in tanks, whether it's providing different equipment to the fire department. We would work through our emergency preparedness plan to make sure that there was an adequate way to make sure that there was ample enough water available to the fire brigade to respond to an incident. So I can't give any specific answers right now as we work through that plan.
Thanks, Councillor Hicks. And I think that question may be well suited to the chief later on in the agenda when we have further discussions on it. So is there anything else?
Best practice now is actually to not put water on batteries. So heating water to put out a fire on batteries is actually not recommended.
Yep, that may be helpful. And again, we can address some of these concerns with the fire chief when we actually get into the staff report issue. So is there any other questions for William? Oh, Deputy Mayor Calver, and then we'll go to Councillor Martin.
Do you have any of these up and running in Canada right now?
We have some small scale projects currently up and running. Nothing of quite this size yet, but we have some small scale projects in Ontario. This is one of the first procurements of this size for the technology, so there's not much in Ontario currently.
Okay, so you mentioned the one in Chicago. How long has it been up and functioning for?
I believe that project came online early 2010s, maybe 2010, 2011. I can confirm that for you. And we have 19 projects in development or in operation in the United States currently.
Okay, have you had any issues at any of your ones that are up and running?
I can't recall any specific issues, but I'm happy to speak with our team and provide any information.
Thank you.
Great. Councilor, did you have a question or no?
The only question I have is, can we take a quick break? I haven't had too many coffees tonight.
Yeah, no, we were going to take a break after William's presentation. That's going to be the most appropriate time before we get into one of the other projects. So if there's no further questions for William, seeing none, thank you, sir, for your presentation. I think what we'll do now at this point is take a 10-minute break before we get into one of the other projects. So we'll see you in about 10 minutes, folks. Thanks. Thanks, folks. Welcome back. Moving on through our agenda, we have Keith Brooks proposed Napanee Generating Station Expansion Project by Atura. Keith, is Keith here? Sorry, he's on Zoom. And bring him in whenever you're ready, Kylie. Thanks, folks. Welcome back. Moving on through our agenda, we have Keith Brooks proposed Napanee Generating Station Expansion Project by Atura. Keith, is Keith here?
Yes, I'm online.
He's on Zoom.
Bring him in
Keith,
whenever you're ready.
you're going to have to turn, you must be watching it on Zoom. You're going to have to turn that off because we're getting the feedback. There's a delay. So what was just said, we just heard all over again. So yeah. Are you good there now?
I hope so. Yes. Is it working now?
Yeah, it's working now. That's great. As we've told everybody else, you've got 5 minutes. We're being very strict to stick to the 5 minutes. Madam Clerk has got a timer on, so she'll let me know when the 5 minutes is up, and then there'll be an opportunity for council to ask some questions. So if you just want to stay on afterwards, whenever you're ready, the floor is yours.
Well, thanks very much, Mayor and members of Napanee Council, for having me speak to you tonight. My name is Keith Brooks. I'm with Environmental Defense. We're an environmental charity based in Toronto. We have an office in Ottawa as well. We have a long history of working on environmental issues in Ontario, on energy issues in Ontario. And I'm deeply concerned about Atura's proposal to expand the Napanee gas plant. Natural gas is a key driver of climate change. It's not clean. It's not low carbon. It's not a bridge fuel. It's a fossil fuel, plain and simple. The Napanee gas plant is the third largest gas plant in Ontario, and its next door neighbor, the Lennox plant, is the largest. These plants already have contracts that run to 2040 and 2029 respectively. And I know you're going to hear from the ISO later about the necessity of gas plants, which is a point that I disagree with. But my point I want to make is that there is already a lot of gas here in Napanee, and you definitely don't need more. The existing gas plant is already a significant contributor of greenhouse gases. The expansion, which is essentially a plan to build another gas plant next door to the existing one, would of course increase emissions from the plant, impacting both climate change and local air quality. I mean, they're saying these plants are peaker plants, but we know now that the ISO is running these plants a lot. The emissions from them are much, much greater than what people anticipate. And this is quite problematic. In fact, this plan is part of a plan from the ISO and the provincial government that will increase emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, significantly, undoing much of the progress that we made in this province by phasing out coal. It's also going to undermine Ontario's clean energy advantage, which is the source of competitiveness for this province at this point. Climate change is here now. I'm sure you'll all remember the images of the wildfires raging across this country in the past summer. You'll remember how the sun went orange, how the air smelled like smoke, how smoke from Canada wafted down to the US, and how people were advised to stay indoors because of bad air quality. This is what our future looks like, but worse if we don't get serious about climate change. And you have the power to help us here tonight in this effort. That's what's being asked of you. You can help us have a more stable climate and cleaner air by saying no to this proposal. And I know that Atura is saying that they're just kind of here looking for points in their proposal, but it's not true. They actually need your blessing. The government has been very clear that no gas plants will be built without municipal consent. You have the power to say no, to stop this. And it's not just climate change. Burning gas causes other pollutants, nitrogen oxides, which cause asthma, particulate matter. I know you're going to hear more about that tonight. Atura is saying the plant would be hydrogen ready, but this is not being built to run on 100% hydrogen. It would require extensive modifications to actually run on hydrogen. And there is no plan to get hydrogen. And there's no actual technology. There's no gas plant anywhere in the world that is running on 100% hydrogen. It's a fiction. Now, the ISO wants to give Atura a contract that goes to 2040. And based on recent contract prices for gas plants that they just awarded, this plant will cost Ontario ratepayers, i.e. all of us that use electricity, about $1.5 billion. But it's going to have to close in 2035 because of federal rules that are going to require gas plants to be very low emitting, and this plant will not meet the standard. But what's upsetting is that Atura doesn't care because the province has assured them that gas plants, the power plants will get paid even if they have to close because of federal rules. And so this plant would receive $600 million between the years of 2035 and 2040, though will not be allowed to operate. It's fiscally irresponsible. You have the power to say no. And I know this is a big decision and you're hearing a lot of conflicting information. This is a lot to ask of you. The town of Thorold was asked to make a similar decision, a small town in Niagara. They voted against it because their constituents spoke out and said they did not want the plant there. That's what yours want as well. And you'll remember other gas plant scandals in Ontario. The towns of Mississauga, Mrs. Oakville also said no to gas plants. And the reason that they fought them are the same reasons that Thorold said no and why you should say no as well. I know that you've received hundreds of emails about this. We sent an email to our supporters, and we know that most of the people that have emailed you are from Napanee. They are your residents of Napanee. They are your constituents. One final note, though, is I'm sure you're aware, people outside of Napanee are watching this. They're concerned about the greenhouse gas impacts of this. They're concerned about the fact that this is at cross purposes, what the federal government's trying to do around emissions. And they're also concerned about the payout that OPG is offering, $4.8 million to the Napanee, which I understand is attractive, but it just doesn't sit well with a lot of people. My ask for you is actually to not vote on this tonight, to wait, to consider this proposal, take the time you need to make a wise decision. This is a big decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. Your timing's impeccable. If you just want to hang tight, we'll see if anybody has any questions for you this evening, okay? Just hang tight. As council, does anybody have any questions of Keith with respect to his deputation? Seeing none. Thank you, sir. Much appreciated. Thanks for spending your time here.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Next up, we have Gabriella Calapas. Proposed Napanee Generating Station Expansion Project by Adjourn, and I believe Gabriella is coming in by Zoom as well. Am I correct, Kathy?
Yes. Hi there. Thank you very much.
There she is. Welcome, Gabrielle. Just because you haven't been sitting here this evening, I'll give you the sort of the rules of conduct. Is we're going to provide 5 minutes for you. We're going to be very stringent on the 5 minutes.
Absolutely.
And if you can just stick around once the 5 minutes is up, we may have some questions by council for you. So whenever you're ready, you're more than the floor is yours.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I really appreciate. Sorry, just 1 second. Dear Mayor, council members, municipal staff, and residents of Napanee, I want to express my gratitude for allowing me the opportunity to address the important issue of increased fossil fueled electricity generation infrastructure in Napanee. I work for Clean Air Partnership, and we are a charitable environmental organization that works with Ontario municipalities to support their clean air and climate change actions. I'd like to present a compelling case for why we should not be allocating public funds to support increased fossil fuel electricity generation. First and foremost, endorsing increased fossil fuel electricity generation effectively leads to support for a fossil fuel subsidy. As it stands, the fossil fuel electricity generation sector does not pay its fair share for the carbon emissions it releases to the atmosphere. In our fight against climate change, we should be phasing out fossil fuel subsidies, not adding to them. Moreover, the province's decision to prioritize fossil fuel electricity generation comes after the province canceled over 700 renewable energy contracts. It also comes at a time when we haven't even yet tapped into the business models, such as virtual net metering, that can address the upfront cost barriers for Ontarians to generate their own renewable electricity. It seems so counterintuitive to invest in costly and risky fossil fuel infrastructure when so many low carbon alternatives are available to us. Furthermore, the risks associated with investing in new fossil fuel electricity generation have not been adequately communicated. These costs and risks include carbon pricing and the possibility of stranded assets due to the clean electricity standard. It is also important to note that the province is committed to paying these fossil fuel electricity generators, even if they aren't providing electricity, essentially providing another form of a fossil fuel subsidy. And these fossil fuel electricity generators, I did want to mention that they're private companies. These are not crown corporations. The profits they make are not going to come back to Ontarians. Ontarians are the ones paying for their profits. In addition, supporting new fossil fuel electricity generating stations will hinder Ontario's efforts to create cost-effective jobs and foster local economic development. We need to challenge the current energy planning system, which prioritizes increasing supply over reducing demand. The province allocates significantly far more funds to increase supply than it is willing to invest in reducing electricity demand. Even though reducing energy demand offers far greater job creation and local economic development opportunities, and it reduces vulnerability to fossil fuel related risks for all Ontario communities. I admit I was quite surprised by Atura's offer to contribute a community benefit fund for Napanee. I'm curious to know if Atura provided similar funds to the town of Napanee for their existing gas plant, and if not, why? It seems their willingness to share profit coincides with their need for municipal support to secure a contract from the IESO. I hope that Napanee Council asks Atura what percentage of their profits this fund represents, and please remember that these profits are paid for by Ontarians. In our history, every generation has looked back on the past and questions the decisions of their predecessors. Whether this is related to racial segregation, gender equality in voting, and discrimination based on sexuality. I admit I often wonder what future generations will look at our actions today. And I'm convinced they'll wonder why we delayed so long on taking the essential steps that we need to take to combat climate change and decarbonize our society. We stand at a crossroads where we must choose between investing in a low carbon future or doubling down on the expensive and polluting fossil fuel systems of the past. In light of these considerations, Clean Air Partnership strongly recommends that the town of Greater Napanee please don't provide support for new fossil fuel electricity generating investments in your community, especially not without the information that you need on stranded asset risks, current and future carbon price risks, and the health impacts from air pollution released by the fossil fuel electricity generating plant on local and neighboring communities. I also hope that the town of Greater Napanee also advocates for provincial policies that promote a fair balance between the investments we make in energy demand and with reducing energy demand and versus increasing supply. Thank you very much for your time and careful consideration of these important matters. It is only in decisions like this one in front of you today that we show our commitment to moving towards our needed low carbon future. Please be part of the growing number of municipalities saying no to fossil fuel electricity generation and yes to the low carbon opportunities.
Thank you, Gabrielle. Your timing was pretty good. So if you just want to hang tight there for a minute, then we'll see if council has any questions with respect to your deputation, okay?
Thank you.
Council, do you have any questions of Gabrielle with respect to her presentation? Seeing none. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for taking the time to be here.
Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
We appreciate your time. Thank you. Next up, we have Jack Gibbons, proposed Napanee Generation Station Expansion Project by Atura. He's coming in by Zoom, and I believe he has a PowerPoint, if I'm not mistaken. So if you want to bring him in, thanks, Kylie. Good evening, sir. Jack, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Mayor Richardson. You hear me?
Thank you very much. We can hear you clear. Just to bring you up to speed is that we're providing 5 minutes for everybody this evening, but it's going to be a very strict 5 minutes. So whenever you're ready, but hang tight after your presentation because we may have questions for you. So whenever you're ready, you're more than welcome to start.
Thank you very much, Mayor Richardson and members of council. I'm Jack Gibbons from the Ontario Clean Air Alliance. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today about OPG's proposal to build a gas-fired power plant in your community. The Clean Air Alliance was established in 1997 to promote the phase-out of Ontario's 5 dirty coal-fired power plants, and we're now working on the next step to clean up our electricity grid, namely to phase out gas-fired electricity. Next slide, please. And I'm pleased to report that 35 Ontario municipalities have passed resolutions calling for the phase out of gas power by 2030 or as soon as possible. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, Premier Ford wants to move in the opposite direction. He wants to build 1,500 megawatts of new gas-fired generation capacity, and he wants to ramp up the output and pollution of our gas plants by more than 300% by 2030 and by 700% by 2043. Next slide, please. Now, back in 2017, only 4% of our electricity was produced by burning fossil gas. But under Premier Ford's plan, by 2043, more than a quarter of our electricity will be produced by burning fossil gas. We are going in the wrong direction. Next slide, please. Now, to support Premier Ford's plan, OPG is proposing to build a new gas plant in your community, and that will lead to more asthma attacks in Napanee and more climate damage everywhere. Next slide, please. Now, the good news is that we have much cleaner and lower cost options to keep our lights on. And I'd like to draw your attention first to the gray bar graph that's second from the right. This bar graph shows the cost of power from a new gas-fired power plant. It's 22 cents a kilowatt hour. And if you look to the left, you can see that we have many cleaner and lower cost options to keep our lights on, like energy efficiency, like Quebec water power and wind and solar power. Next slide, please. And it's not just the Clean Air Alliance that is saying that we have cleaner and lower cost options. According to the Royal Bank, Ontario can completely avoid the need for new gas plants and save $500 million a year by investing in technologies to improve our energy efficiency and shift demand from peak to off-peak periods. Next slide, please. And water power from Quebec is another great way to avoid the need for new gas plants. Quebec's demand for electricity peaks in the winter because most of their homes are electrically heated. And as a result, Quebec has a huge surplus of power available to export to Ontario in the summer to power our air conditioners on hot summer days. Next slide, please. And we can also avoid the need for new gas plants by investing in made in Ontario wind and solar energy. And the good news is that we have a huge renewable energy potential. Great Lakes wind power alone could provide us with more than 100% of our electricity needs. But the really good news tonight is that our energy minister, Todd Smith, has said that has given you the power to say no to OPG's proposed new gas-fired power plant. You have the power to say no to it. You have the power to stop it. So I'm here tonight to ask you to please join Kingston and Thorold and Toronto and say no to the proposed new gas-fired power plant for your community, and to say yes to the cleaner and lower cost options to keep our lights on. That is, say yes to energy efficiency, say yes to renewables, and say yes to lower electricity bills and cleaner air. Thank you for your attention, and if you have any questions, I'll be pleased to answer them.
Thank you, Jack. Just hang tight there, and your timing is very, very good. So if you hang tight, we're going to ask council. Does council have any questions with respect to Jack's presentation or deputation? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Cower.
Through your worship, I see the Great Lakes wind power. How come that's never been followed through? I believe Trillium Power tried to do that around 2011. So can you give me any input on that one?
Yes, so Trillium Power does have a proposal to build a large wind farm in the Great Lakes. It could produce a lot of power, but unfortunately, back in 2011, when there was Premier McGuinty put a moratorium on Great Lakes wind power, and as a result, we haven't developed any wind power in the Great Lakes, and that's a huge shame because there's this huge potential for wind power in our Great Lakes. Great Lakes wind power could meet 100% of our electricity needs. So we're calling for the government of Ontario to rescind the moratorium on Great Lakes wind power and to establish an annual competitive procurement process for wind power, solar power, and water power to get new renewable supplies for Ontario consumers at the lowest possible cost.
Okay, I just had one more question. If something like wind did come up, how long would it take to build something like that?
Well, the construction time for a wind farm, the construction time is a year. So the construction time for wind turbines is comparable to that of a new gas-fired power plant.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Calvers. Any other questions for Jack? Go ahead, Councillor Pennell.
Thank you, Worship, through you. Jack, thank you very much for coming in here tonight and giving us this presentation. I'm just going to piggyback on what Deputy Mayor Calver was asking you. Is we have wind turbines down here in our area, and we see them locked out most of the time. And I do happen to travel up through the Bruce Peninsula and such, and there's many wind turbines there that seem to be locked out most of the time. And I'm just wondering, what's your thoughts on why the government is not using that power? Why are they locked out?
Well, wind now provides us with 10% of our total electricity needs. And it's a great resource. Now Premier Ford, when he first got elected, he was very strongly opposed to wind power, and he was upset about the relatively high prices that the McGuinty government paid for wind power in the past. But the good news is that thanks to technological improvements, the cost of wind power and the cost of solar power have come down dramatically. And now they are the world's lowest cost sources of new electricity supply. So going forward, if we want to keep our lights on at the lowest possible cost, we should be contracting for new wind and solar power. But unfortunately, Premier Ford, he really likes fossil gas, and that's unfortunate because wind power and solar power are much cleaner. They're much better for our health. They don't cause asthma attacks. And now they're much lower cost than a new gas-fired power plant. Now, you saw the bar graphs I showed you. You know, the cost of a new peaker gas-fired power plant is 22 cents a kilowatt hour. And wind and solar are less than half that. So if we want to reduce our electricity bills and if we want to reduce pollution, we really need to start investing in wind and solar power again.
Go ahead, Councillor Pennell. He's got another question there.
Thank you, Worship, through you. Just to follow up, Jack, you steered me back to your chart. Thank you. And I noticed that you have two wind charts on here, one at 14.3 and one at 6.75. But in between there, you have nuclear, and you didn't talk about nuclear at all. Could you just touch base with that for us, please?
Well, yes. So nuclear, the price we're paying for nuclear power today is 10.9 cents a kilowatt hour, but it's going to go up. As you know, Ontario Power Generation is rebuilding their Darlington nuclear station, but that's a very costly rebuild. And that's going to push up the price of nuclear power to 13.7 cents per kilowatt hour by 2027. So what we have now is we have the situation where nuclear power from our existing nuclear stations is now more expensive than solar power or onshore wind. And also with respect to nuclear power, the bar graph on the very far right of the slide shows the cost of nuclear power from a new nuclear reactor. And as you know, Premier Ford wants to build new nuclear reactors at Darlington. And new nuclear is going to be very, very expensive, even more expensive than a gas-fired power plant. And so again, what our chart shows is that wind and solar and even wind power that's located in the Great Lakes is much lower cost than building new nuclear reactors, as well as being much lower cost than building new gas-fired power plants. So we really need to change direction. In the past, Ontario has been heavily reliant on nuclear power and heavily reliant on fossil power. But that doesn't make sense anymore, because there's been these huge technological improvements that have dramatically reduced the cost of wind and solar. So if we want to create clean air and the lowest possible electricity bills for Ontario's consumers, we've got to start investing big time in wind and solar energy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pennell. Is there any other questions? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Calver.
Just one more question. You're showing here that for sure solar is the way to go. What do we do with these panels when they've reached their lifespan? Where do we get rid of them?
Well, that's an issue. There's no perfect solution, and we have to have improvements in recycling for solar for sure. But there's no perfect solution. And yes, there are problems with solar, with the panels, but those problems are very small and easy to handle compared to the problems associated with nuclear waste, which future generations would have to safeguard for 1 million years.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Calver. Is there, go ahead, Councillor Hicks.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Jack. Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
I'm looking at your presentation. I'm looking at slide 14, where you say, please say yes to energy efficiency, renewable storage, and lower electricity bills. Regarding storage, which of course has been a very hot topic here this evening, what is your preferred method for storing and discharging energy?
Well, absolutely the best method for storing wind and solar power are Quebec's hydroelectric reservoirs. And Ontario is very fortunate to be located right next door to Quebec, because according to a study by the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Quebec's hydroelectric reservoirs, which are already built and paid for, they are the lowest cost storage option for our wind and solar energy. So we really need to tap into that low cost source of storage. Hydro-Quebec's reservoirs can meet our storage needs at a much, much lower cost than new large stationary batteries. Now, Premier Wind signed an agreement back in 2016 or 2017 to import power from Quebec and also to get some storage services from Quebec. And that was a good deal for Ontario. Unfortunately, the deal was for a fairly small amount of water power and storage. Now, unfortunately, a little while ago, Premier Ford said he wasn't going to renew Kathleen Wynne's deal with Quebec, her 7-year deal with Quebec. And there was a lot of pushback against that decision by Premier Ford. And as a result, he's changed directions. And now he's committed to negotiating to buy up to 600 megawatts of water power from Quebec. And as part of that deal, he should also be buying storage services from Quebec, because really this is our lowest cost storage option. And also to fully exploit this great storage resource, we're going to need to build new transmission links with Quebec, but they can be done in existing Hydro One transmission corridors. So that's by far our best storage option. Another good storage option are the batteries in our electric vehicles. And at the moment, our electric vehicles, they're charged, they get their electricity from the grid, but at the moment they're not allowed to provide power back to the grid. And that doesn't make sense. We need to have bidirectional chargers, which will allow our electric vehicles not only to store surplus wind and solar energy in their batteries, but provide it back to the grid on peak demand times to help us phase out our gas-fired power plants. And our electric vehicles, they're a great storage option because, again, the batteries are already paid for to run the cars. But if we use them to also power the grid, then we're getting two services out of that single battery, and that makes it a very a cost-effective option. And by 2030, the total storage capacity of our electric vehicles batteries will be more than double the capacity of all of our gas-fired power plants. So they can really make a very large contribution. So we need to persuade Premier Ford to purchase electricity from our electric vehicles batteries. Again, so these are the two lowest cost options. Premier Ford is, pursuing high cost stationary batteries, and you've heard about them earlier tonight. And they're part of the solution for Ontario's electricity system, but they should only be one part. And there's these two other options, storage options, which are much lower cost and should have a much, much larger role to play if we want to keep our lights on at the lowest possible cost.
Thank you, sir. Councillor Hicks, did you have another question or no?
No, just an observation. So when you're talking about the bidirectional battery, that would be similar to, and I'm going back here a few years, but similar to what the braking system on a train would use. In my previous life, this is something that it was an innovation developed by Bombardier, where they would capture the energy and then use it for the auxiliary power. So interesting. Okay, thank you very much, Jack. I won't take any more of your time.
Thank you, Councillor Hicks. Is there any other questions or comments for Mr. Gibbons? Seeing none, thank you, sir. We appreciate the time this evening. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Eric DePoe, proposed Napanee Generating Station expansion and best project by Atura. And Mr. DePoe is here with us this evening. I think you probably know the routine by now, Eric. Whenever you're ready, you're more than welcome to address council.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. And good evening to all councillors and Your Worship and Deputy Mayor Calver. There is an elephant in the room that's not being addressed by Atura in their submissions or by the staff report. And that issue is the issue we all face, and that's climate change. We're in a climate crisis. Climate change is happening right now. It's driving our extreme weather, including heat waves, droughts, floods, and windstorms. Tornadoes and hurricanes are increasing in number and in intensity due to the increased heat energy in the atmosphere. The wildfires that we all saw last summer that destroyed 16.5 million hectares of our forests across the country, and that was by early September. This is by far the most destructive year we've ever had, and we're looking forward to another one in 2024. We all know that whenever we burn hydrocarbons, we're creating CO2, which is a greenhouse gas that has already reached crisis levels in our atmosphere due to the digging up and burning of fossil fuels, namely coal, oil, and natural gas. Now, natural gas is mostly methane. Methane is much more potent than CO2 as a greenhouse gas. The further danger with natural gas is the additional emissions of methane that come from transporting it from where it is produced to where it is to be burnt. The pipelines and storage facilities for natural gas inevitably all leak to some extent, so the fewer of these we have, the better. Plus, there are pipeline failures and appliance failures that produce many natural gas fires and explosions annually. Our federal government has set many targets over the years to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. They have missed every one of the targets that they themselves set. Mr. Jerry DeMarco is the federal government's Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development in Ottawa. He reported last week that we are not on track to meet our 2030 goal of reducing emissions either. He said, Canada is the only G7 country that has not achieved any emission reductions since 1990. So this is a horrible record. It's a terrible record that Canadians should be ashamed of. And here again today, We have a proposal to increase, not reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Now, we often feel that decisions about the climate crisis are made above our heads, and then we don't have any way of getting input into Ottawa or into Queen's Park. But the proposal to build a gas plant right here in our community means that we have a chance to make a difference right here in Napanee. The decision that this council will make can determine whether we are part of the problem or whether we're part of the solution. We know almost nothing about the cost of this plant. There are no estimates of how much fuel it will burn and most importantly, how much CO2 it will emit. None of the reports I've seen have any information about the climate impact of this proposal, which would be essential to make a decision, in my view. How do we know we even need this plant, let alone at what cost, both financial and environmental? How can anyone be expected to make a decision without these important figures? The building of this plant will take us in the wrong direction, where we will be increasing CO2, not reducing it. There are other better options, and we've heard those in previous presentations, so I don't need to repeat them now, but I urge council to turn down the proposal for the gas turbine plant expansion. Another part of this proposal is the community benefit fund. Atira promises to pay $1,000 per megawatt generated per year, and this carrot could total up to 4.8 million, but there's no guarantee that it would do so. Now, who would pay this 4.8 million in inducement? Where does this money come from? Is it from electricity consumers? I believe it is. So is this an attempt to buy council's votes on this proposal? Are we going to sell Atura a license to heat our planet up for a community benefit fund that's paid by all the electricity bill payers in Ontario? We know people are struggling to pay their bills now. There's an affordability crisis in Canada. And do we want to add to that by saying, yes, Atura, we want you to charge electricity companies or customers in Ontario more money so we can pay Napanee Council a so-called inducement to let us have a new gas plant. So I say we should say no to this. So I'm sorry.
Yeah, we've got 2 seconds left, Eric.
Okay, I was going to talk about the other proposal, but I guess I've run out of time.
Yeah, we've got to our 5 minutes. Hang tight. We'll see if council has any questions or comments with respect to your deputation. Does anybody? Go ahead, Councillor Pennell.
Thank you, Worship. Thanks, Eric, for coming in here. You just hit a nail with me when you said that they're paying council. That is not paying council. I would like, it is a community fund and it's not paying us directly. I take offense to that, but I think that you just made a slip up, but I just want to be clear about that.
Okay, yeah, and I certainly had no intention of suggesting that this was going at the pockets of anybody at the front of the room. I have no suspicion that that would be true. And if anybody is taking that suspicion, I hope they withdraw that immediately.
And I appreciate that. And I think that you just made a slip, but I just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Pennell. Thank you, Eric. Is there any other questions or comments for Eric before we move on? Seeing none. Thank you, sir. Thank you for being here this evening. We're into a long night already, but
yes, we are. Thank you so much.
Next up, we have Millie Roy, if I've got that correct, and she'll be coming on via Zoom, and she does have a PowerPoint presentation. So whenever you're ready, Kylie. Just before we hear from Millie, it's getting late this evening. We're going to be looking for a motion to go on past 10 o'clock. What I would like to do is try and get all our deputations done this evening. So I would entertain a motion to go on past 10 o'clock until such, and then once we get the deputations done, we'll reassess our agenda to see how late in the evening we want to go. So, but I'll entertain that for now anyways. Moved by Councillor Pennell, seconded by Councillor Hicks. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed, motion's carried. Thanks, folks, and thanks, Millie, for waiting till we got a little bit of business out of the way. Are you on? Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you very well. Thank you and welcome. If you haven't been watching, we're on a very strict timeline as far as 5 minutes. We'll allow you to go to the 5 minutes, and once the time is up, I'll cut in. But hang tight in case there's some questions from council with respect to your presentation.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to speak today. I'm Dr. Millie Roy, a practicing physician and Ontario co-chair for the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment, or CAPE. To protect the public health of residents of Greater Napanee and other Ontarians, CAPE Ontario respectfully requests Council to reject Atura's bid to expand gas capacity at the Napanee Generating Station, as it is not in the public interest. Next slide, please. With the hottest summer in recorded human history triggering the worst wildfires in Canadian history this year, we're undeniably in a climate crisis, and fossil fuels are the #1 driver. This includes so-called natural gas, which is primarily methane, a highly potent fossil fuel. The impact of gas, including human health harms and deaths worldwide in 2020, was comparable to coal. Next slide, please. Ontario's coal phase-out was the single largest greenhouse gas reduction ever achieved in North America and nearly eliminated harmful smog days. But gas-fired electricity generates the same pollutants found in smog and air pollution, including particulate matter and nitrogen dioxides. So gas expansion risks reversing much of the huge and hard-won benefits of getting off coal. Next slide. Gas-fired electricity damages human health by escalating both carbon pollution, causing climate change, and by generating toxic air pollution. Next slide, please. The climate crisis is widely recognized as the single greatest threat to human health of our time. Next slide. Health harms range from illness, injury, and death from extreme weather to heat and wildfires. Next slide, please. And next slide again, and also housing and food insecurity. Next slide. It also escalates infectious diseases. In fact, nearly 60% of all pathogenic diseases may be aggravated by climate change. Lyme disease, West Nile, pandemic risks have already increased in Ontario. And the near future risks, we may see malaria, Zika, yellow fever emerging, things we've never seen here. Next slide, please. There are also devastating mental health impacts, especially for our youth, depression, suicide, and 60% worldwide feeling that governments are betraying them. Next slide, please. Air pollution prematurely kills around 6,600 Ontarians every year and costs our province $50 billion every year. Next slide, please. Air pollution causes multi-system disease, including asthma, heart disease, stroke, dementia, ADHD, diabetes. Next slide, please. Multiple cancers, such as lung, breast, and leukemia. Next slide. There are serious risks to pregnant women and babies. Next slide. And again, independent risks for mental health harms. Next slide. And increasing antibiotic resistance. Next slide, please. We know people living near gas plants have increased health risks, such as emergency room visits in the elderly, preterm deliveries in the pregnant women, restricted activity days, and bronchitis. And health impacts solely due to gas-fired electricity in Toronto in a single year were estimated at over 1,300 children suffering asthma, nearly 9,700 sick leave days amongst workers, and 215 premature deaths, causing 3,400 plus years of life lost. Next slide, please. This gas plant is very close, within about 12 to 16 kilometers of Greater Napanee homes, families, and schools filled with our children who are especially at risk. It's important to take time to study and consider this in decision-making. Next slide, please. There are better solutions, as we've heard, renewables, which can protect human health, save lives, and save money. For instance, by saving the massive cost of fossil-induced human health and public infrastructure damage. Renewables are now the cheapest source of energy in the world and becoming cheaper. Many jurisdictions worldwide have already successfully transitioned to large-scale renewables without significant brownouts and risks. And last slide, please. So at this critical moment in time, Council holds the power to oppose fossil fuel expansion to safeguard public health, as endorsed in the open letter we shared with you, signed by over 400 Ontario health professionals. As a physician and as a mother, I hope each Council member will reflect personally on the very real toll of the deepening climate and air pollution crises to be either averted or to be locked in for generations by your decision. We're counting on Council to decide in the best public interest of your constituents, and especially for our children who have no voice here, but will be most vulnerable. Please reject fossil gas expansion and move forward with clean energy solutions. This is a powerful opportunity.
Thank you, Millie. We're at the 5 minutes. Thank you very much. Just hang tight. Council, does anybody have any questions of Millie with respect to her presentation? Seeing none. Thank you, ma'am. We appreciate your time this evening, and thanks for waiting up for us. And there's no questions from Council, so we can let you go then. So thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we have a Denise and John O'Brien proposed Napanee Generating Station expansion by Atura. And yep. Come on up, folks. I think you probably know the routine by now. We'll
Really?
Yeah, I know. I may be a slow learner, but I do learn after time. So I won't go through the 5 minute process, but whenever you're ready, you're more than
saves more
welcome
time.
to start. So
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council, for opening up this meeting to allow many people to speak. I didn't actually learn, or we didn't learn about this meeting until early this morning, and quickly registered to be able to speak before noon, and thank you for slotting us in. After that, I then went through the agenda and researched all the names and that were going to speak, and I was really happy to hear or to see that most of the people speaking were extremely informed and educated and experts on the whole issue, both the the climate crisis and the health issues, et cetera, et cetera. So I didn't really think I'd have much more to add. I'm not an expert, but I'm a person that's educated herself for many years on the climate crisis, what's caused it, what's caused climate change, and the science, the evidence that supports its cause primarily by the burning of fossil fuel. I learned that natural gas is anything but natural. I have to admit that 10 years ago, I didn't understand that. Somebody named that very well to suck us all in and not realize that, as I think Eric mentioned, methane is much worse for the atmosphere than CO2. All I want to say to council is, I would like to say, please say no to this this proposed expansion of the gas plant. But if you're not prepared to say no at this point, reconsider, take some time to consider your answer, and perhaps invite more residents, taxpayers of this town to speak. I don't know. I guess I'm disappointed because since moving here, I've realized, and it's really no different than any other place. There's people that just don't do their own research. They follow what somebody writes on social media, notes written without any links that take them to fact or expert reports. Just Joe Blow said this. Of late, we have installed a air source heat pump, and my husband and I are just appalled by what some people think that they won't do. Like, I guess I'll make perfect example, Danielle Smith, Premier of Alberta. She actually was interviewed a few weeks ago and said that they don't work in cold temperatures, which is bull. We had a few days of minus 32 degrees last winter, and we didn't yet have our electric backup installed. Our amp hadn't been moved from 100 to 200. Our house stayed warm, cozy. There was no problem. There was no problem with air conditioning all this summer. So, and then her second, that insurance companies won't insure your house if you install an air source heat pump. I spent 40 years in the insurance industry, and that is just absolutely ridiculous. To finish, and I don't want any to sound negative, but we were aware through all of the organizations that we're part of, that this proposal was coming down the tubes from the Ontario government. And during the last council meeting that we attended, which is with regard to the rail trail, and there was, I think in excess of 100 people that came to that meeting. I spoke to some council members.
Yep, sorry, there goes our alarm clock there. Thanks, Denise and John. Just hang tight and we'll see if we have any questions from council, okay, please. Is there any questions? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Calver.
Just out of curiosity, looking at a heat pump myself, what is your average hydro bill, if you don't mind me asking?
We live in a house that's built in 1900. So it wasn't the most energy efficient home when we moved in there a year ago. And we've dragged it kicking and screaming into the 21st century. We have an air source heat pump, an air source hot water tank, and an 8.3 kilowatt system of solar panels on the roof, which help supply electricity to the house. Our last hydro bill was a credit of $174. We haven't had a full year yet, but it's pretty amazing. My parents had a air source heat pump in their house back in the late 70s, and it was useless. And so I believed all of that, but the technology has just gone crazy. You get, for every dollar you put in, you get between $3 and $4 worth of heat out of it. Not like a 97% efficient gas furnace where 3% goes up the chimney. It flips that completely on its end. And right now we're going to be getting back $10,000 from the federal government because we did that. Not everyone can afford that. That's true. But if Mr. Ford and other, like the federal government, if they taxed the excess of profits from the fossil fuel industry, which is billions of dollars right now, that's why our gas is so much money, they would get $4.5 billion per year that they could use to help people who can't afford to put in air source heat pumps and get them off of gas. We were able to say goodbye to Enbridge, and it was the happiest day of my life.
Oh, thank you. No, that's why I was going that direction, because the new air pumps are amazing and good down to minus 30.
Yeah.
The problem is, of course, cost.
Yeah.
Most people can't afford that.
Right.
And I know myself with my house, when I first bought it, had electric baseboard heaters, and I look at an $800 a month hydro bill.
No, we're the most we were hitting 200 during the winter.
But that would be you've got also your backup of your solar, which is awesome. That's fabulous. Yeah, good for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Calver. Is there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, thanks, folks. Thanks for being here this evening and for presenting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Eric McBay, proposed Napanee Generating Station expansion by Atura via Zoom, and Eric has a PowerPoint presentation.
Greetings.
Good evening, Eric. Can you hear us?
I can, and I'm aware of the 5-minute limitation.
Okay, thank you very much. It saves me doing a lot of talking. I can do more listening than talking. So whenever you're ready, go ahead.
Perfect, thank you. And I believe that I can share my screen with you. Is that correct, Kylie? I can share my presentation.
Yep, Kylie's nodding yes, yep.
Okay, perfect. Great. So let me just make sure that is set up here. Pardon me. Great. Can you see that?
Yeah, we can get it. We've got it there now. Go ahead.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So my name is Eric McVeigh. I am the climate lead at the Sisters of Providence, or the Providence Center for Justice, Peace, and Integrity of Creation. So my office was started by the Sisters of Providence, who also created 24 healthcare facilities in our region, including hospital and long-term care centers. And my job specifically is to focus on the health impacts of climate change. I live on Howe Island, downwind of the proposed expansion, where I'm also a farmer and first responder. I respond on a weekly basis to medical emergencies on our island, so I see directly the effects of climate change on food production and on the health of our community. This is a chart showing greenhouse gas emissions for all of Canada in 2018. You can see the red line represents electricity generation that was on decline for years due to the closure of coal-fired power plants in Ontario. That was a very positive trend, but unfortunately it was reversed after the election of Doug Ford in 2018. He said he was proud of tearing up hundreds of green energy contracts and was willing to spend nearly $250 million of public money to shut down those contracts, essentially spending that money on nothing, including decommissioning a wind turbine plant that was almost operational. Since 2017, the IESO has more than doubled their use of fossil fuels for electricity generation, and you have a chance to help reverse this trend. Canadian greenhouse gas emissions worsen climate change everywhere. The United Nations predicts that there will be more than 1.2 billion people displaced by climate change by 2050. But climate change directly affects our health closer to home. We've already heard about some of those impacts. Napanee in the 20th century had an average of 5 days per year where the temperature was very hot, over 30 degrees. We now experience 15 very hot days per year. By 2050, that will be 30 very hot days each year. And by the end of the century, we'll be looking at more than 75 days each year, which exceed 30 degrees, a dramatic increase. That poses high temperatures pose a long-term risk to the heart, kidneys, mental functioning. It also disrupts sleep, and people are 50% more likely to die from all kinds of disease when the nights are hot. There are also concerns about new infectious diseases, worsening ticks, and so on. Now, air pollution in particular has some negative effects. According to a 2021 report by Public Health Agency of Canada, it's responsible for about 15,300 premature deaths in Canada, including symptoms that are not fatal, and leads to an economic cost of about $120 billion per year, including both healthcare costs and missed days of work due to illness. Because I live downwind from this proposed project, if it's constructed, it will make my work as a farmer and a first responder more difficult and more dangerous. Air pollution is also worsened by wildfires, which are caused in part now by climate change. Lastly, I want to emphasize the ways that wasteful energy spending worsens inflation and worsens the cost of living for everyone. Projects like this gas expansion will increase costs for regular people at a time when inflation has already strained the budgets of many households. It doesn't make sense to build a new gas plant when renewables are cheaper than fossil fuels. So I would ask for you to vote against a project that would waste hundreds of millions of dollars of taxpayer funding, in particular through the continued payments after the 2035 shutdown, harm the health of regular people with air pollution, put greater burdens on our healthcare system, including frontline workers, needlessly delay the transition to renewable energy, and make cost of living more expensive for Ontarians. Thank you so much for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Yep, thank you, sir. Your timing was very well. So just hang tight, and I'm just going to see if council has any questions for you with respect to your deputation. Council, do you have any? Go ahead, Councillor Hicks.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Eric, I just have a question. Could you repeat, you're with the Providence Center for JPIC, just what that stood for?
Yes, that stands for Justice, Peace, and Integrity of Creation. And so that means our office looks at some of the social determinants of health. So, you know, when we go to the hospital or the doctor, that accounts for maybe 20% of our health and well-being. And the other 80% is determined by factors like the environment, socioeconomic factors, the community we live in, and this sort of thing. And so the Sisters of Providence realized that they couldn't just look at healthcare provision, they had to look at the bigger picture that influences people's health and well-being.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hicks. Is there any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, sir. Thank you for waiting for us, and thank you for presenting this evening.
Thank you very much.
Next up, we have Brad Quinte on behalf of Atura Power, proposed Napanee Generating Station expansion and best project by Atura. And I believe Brad's coming, he's here in person. Thank you, sir. And you do have a PowerPoint presentation?
Yes, I do.
Great. And you understand the rules of engagement here?
Got it. Yep. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. So whenever you're ready.
Okay, sorry, can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, great. No, thank you, Your Worship and Council. So across North America, Ontario has the highest risk of blackouts right now due to having a low buffer of reserve supply compared to the peak demand. So basically looking at this graph, the black band that you see is the minimum reliability requirement, and the height of the bar above is the buffer that we have to that requirement. So today, this is just today, so we're cutting it close in terms of reliability. And in a few years, Ontario will drop below the minimum unless reliable new resources are added. So this graph, this graph represents the current electricity system in 2029 if no new generation is added. The blue bars across the screen represent the number and duration of risk events. Basically, these are periods of time when the system is at risk of a blackout. So batteries can deal with up to 4-hour risk events. At 6 hours or more, natural gas is the only technology we have that can provide reliability for risk event this long. So as you can see, there are many risk events ranging from 6 to 22 hours when batteries wouldn't have helped. These risk events often occur due to unavailability of wind and solar generation, so adding more doesn't help with these challenges. Gas is the only currently available technology that can provide reliability during these risk events. So this graph shows how different types of generation supply power during peak demand periods. So weather patterns don't always align with peak usage. As a result, wind and solar need a reliable backup like natural gas. So natural gas generation isn't suddenly going to disappear after 2035. The federal government wanted to indicate they're serious about reducing emissions, so they led with an aspirational target for the proposed clean electricity regulation that would have Canada's electricity systems change immediately to become carbon-free in 2035. This was never practically achievable, but a good place to start as a negotiating point. The draft regulations have been revised and are now starting to consider reliability needs, and they allow natural gas to operate post-2035 in a more limited role to support reliability. Current provisions allow natural gas to operate or would allow natural gas to operate for up to 450 hours, and it's similar to how peaking facilities in Ontario, like the Lennox plant here, operates today. And this is how the proposed Napanee station expansion would also operate. New technologies need to be developed to allow the complete phase out of natural gas. In an Ontario context, it makes no sense to rush the phase out of natural gas when Ontario's electricity system is already cleaner and less carbon intensive than other areas of the economy like transportation or residential heating. In fact, electrification of other higher emitting sectors offers a more cost-effective strategy to carbon reduction than rushing to phase out gas. To put this all in context, electricity in Ontario is 3% of our overall emissions, but it supplies 24% of overall energy. In Ontario, electricity is by far the cleanest source of energy we have, and it's the key tool for reducing emissions in other higher emitting sectors like transportation, industry, and residential heating. This graph illustrates how the existing electricity system would respond to increased demand over time. So the yellow bar you see at the top, it represents basically the growth of emissions in the electricity sector that's driven by, growth in electricity demand, so population growth, but also electrification of the higher emitting sectors. Increased electricity production will support converting big polluters like gas-powered vehicles and coal-fired industry to electricity that results in a average of 1.5 times net reduction in emissions. And that's represented by the falling dotted line. So electricity sector emissions are going up, but they're more than offset by emissions in the broader economy. And what this is showing is the electricity system, after considering the broader emission offsets, is forecasted to reach net zero by 2039. So Ontario is one of the cleanest electricity systems in the world. Replacing coal with natural gas greatly reduced the carbon intensity of the grid, and drastically lowered the number of smog days in Ontario. The graph on the top compares the carbon intensity of Ontario's electricity to countries with similar economies. So the only country even close is France. It's due to a similar mix: nuclear, hydroelectric, and renewable generation supplemented by natural gas. Most other jurisdictions, including Germany, rely heavily on coal to balance renewables. Last year, Ontario's electricity system was 90% carbon-free. So basically, closing, we support staff's recommendations to support the Napanee generating station expansion and Napanee battery energy storage system phase 2, and it's to ensure that the reliability of Ontario's electricity system can be maintained.
Great, thank you, sir. Just hang tight and we'll see if council has any questions with respect to your deputation. Council, do you have any questions for Brad with respect to his presentation here this evening? Deputy Mayor Calver, go ahead.
Yeah, maybe you can answer this, maybe you can't. The gas line coming down from the 401, is it feeding both plants now, or is it just feeding the new Napanee generating station?
So the supply line going to the Napanee generating station, is that your?
Yes.
Yeah, so it would supply the new plants as well.
But is it currently supplying the Lennox generating plant?
Yes, it's supplying all 3 plants.
What's your usage of natural gas? Do you know?
We can provide that. I don't have that number offhand.
I was just curious because it's about a 24-inch line coming down through there.
I don't know offhand.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Calver. Is there any other questions of Brad with respect? Go ahead, Councillor Pennell.
Thank you, Worship. Through you, Brad, thanks a lot for coming in tonight and speaking with us. Maybe you can answer this for us. How much weight is actually put with Todd's comment of that you need a willing host to be able to build your plant? How much weight is really behind that?
Well, I would say, practically speaking, if you decide tonight that to not grant a resolution, we would not submit a proposal for this project. In addition, through the RFP, there is a requirement that proponents do obtain a support resolution, whether it's at bid or it's 18 months later. But there is a mandatory requirement to have that resolution in place to proceed with the project.
Okay, thank you. And just to follow up, other than the site, have you tried any other sites locally?
We have not tried any other sites locally. The reason for looking at this location is really its location. It's located at the intersection of the gas system and the transmission system, really the backbone of the province, and it is located near to other facilities, for that reason.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Pennell. Is there any other questions for Brad this evening? Seeing none, thank you, sir. And you're more than welcome to stick around. I may have a question for you a little bit later, but if you want to stick around, we're getting close to the end of our deputations here now. Up next, we have Chuck Farmer on behalf of the IESO, and I believe Chuck's coming in via Zoom, and he's going to have a PowerPoint presentation as well. Kylie, am I correct? Just hang tight with us here, Chuck. Can you hear me?
I can, Mr. Mayor.
Great, thank you. Just hang tight. We're just having a little bit of a technical problem up front here, but I think we may have it resolved. I can just give you a bit of the rules of engagement this evening, sir. We're keeping our deputations to a 5-minute limit, and I'll let you know when you get to that 5-minute limit. But hang around afterwards because there may be some questions from council with respect to your presentation. So whenever you're ready, Chuck, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. It's a pleasure to be able to speak with you today about how we at the ISO are preparing Ontario's electricity system for the future, and specifically to talk about the province's growing electricity needs and what we are doing to meet those needs and how we are working on decarbonizing our grid and our broader economy. I am Chuck Farmer. I am the ISO's Chief Energy Transition Officer, and my accountabilities are to power system planning, the design and delivery of conservation programming, and generation procurements. And if we can move to the next slide, please. I will give you the quick disclaimer. As you know and have been hearing from proponents, there is currently an active procurement for new electricity supply. As a competitive procurement, I'm unable to speak to any of the specific projects here today. My purpose is to provide the context behind why the ISO recommended that we needed incremental gas generation to maintain the reliability of the system. On to slide 3. And who is the ISO? We are the provincial agency. We are accountable in law to maintain the reliability of the electricity system, both now and into the future. And we prepare the system for the future by ensuring there is enough generation and transmission to meet the future needs of customers. And we are supporting an orderly transition to a net zero electricity system and a net zero economy in a way that balances reliability and affordability. Our electricity system is a key enabler of the province's economic growth, and as I'll discuss, a key enabler of the decarbonization of the economy. On slide 4, you can see that electricity demand is growing, and that is a bit different to the story of the last 20 years. For the last 20 years, demand of electricity has been flat. And as recently as 3 years ago, it was reasonable to believe that trend would continue. However, now we are seeing Ontario's electricity needs are increasing, driven by economic development in energy-intensive manufacturing, population and housing growth, and the electrification of transportation and the electrification of industry. And our forecasts show that demand could grow by about 40% over the next 2 decades, and that number would be a lot higher if electrification efforts intensify. There is an urgent need to get electricity infrastructure built to ensure we can meet the growing needs of the province. Recent industrial announcements like Stellantis, Volkswagen, and Umicore demonstrate how quickly new power can be needed. These 3 facilities alone will add the same amount of electricity that is used by the City of London, and they will need that power over the next few years. On to slide 5, and we can talk about natural gas and the role it will play in this energy transition. And it is a critical role that natural gas plays in our system. It provides flexibility and certainty to quickly respond to changes in demand and system conditions. We need it to manage the system during heat waves and other emergencies. And there is not currently a like-for-like replacement available. We will need a portfolio of solutions, some of which are currently unproven and will need time to mature. However, they will not be able to be deployed in time at the scale required to meet the near-term needs. And it is very important to recognize that large infrastructure, including the transmission required to connect it, can take 10 years or more to build. And a significant amount of new infrastructure needs to get sited and built. So on slide 6, basically emission reductions will not happen without reliable, affordable grid. People will not invest in electrification, such as heat pumps or industrial processes, if they cannot count on electricity to be there at a reasonable price. And in Ontario, we start from a good position. Our electricity system is one of the cleanest in North America, accounting for less than 3% of the province's emissions. And we need to increase the size of our electricity system to support the growth in electric vehicles, people who switch to heat pumps, and electrification of industrial processes. And the emissions reductions that we'll achieve from these efforts will be greater than the incremental emissions from the new natural gas generation. And while we'll rely on gas generation into the early 2030s, we are executing a plan to reduce emissions by increasing conservation and building new generation, including renewable energy and nuclear. On slide 7, to get to net zero while simultaneously increasing the size of our system, this will be complex, and we will need a lot of options, and they are all underway. We are undertaking the largest energy storage procurement in Canada. We've expanded conservation program. We just signed a new electricity trade agreement with Quebec. We are supporting the expansion of the nuclear fleet to include small modular reactors, exploring the potential of hydrogen, and launching procurements for new renewable supply. And these will all commit to a clean future. So with that, I think that's 5 minutes. The conclusion basically says thank you.
Yep, you've hit the 5-minute mark right on. So thank you, sir. Just hang tight, Chuck. We'll see if we have any questions from council with respect to your presentation. Council? Go ahead, Councillor Pennell.
Thank you very much for providing this to us. I'm not sure if you can speak of the specifics, but you just mentioned that you signed a contract with Quebec. Could you explain that?
Yes, we did sign an energy swap with Quebec. Right now it is an MOU and we're negotiating the final terms of the agreement, but it is essentially for 600 megawatts of capacity that we will provide to Quebec in the winter when they are short of capacity to run their system, and they will provide back to us in the summer.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pennell. Is there any other questions for Chuck before we let him go? I don't see any, Chuck. The only question I have, and I think I know the answer to, that if any of these organizations were to submit a letter of support from our council, what was the date on that again?
Well, so the requirement is to have a community support resolution by 18 months after the conclusion of the RFP. So they could submit their proposal without a community support resolution, but they would not be allowed to proceed to construction until they get that resolution, and it has to be within 18 months. I believe the closing date for the RFP submissions is December 12th.
Yeah, okay, that's the date that I had in mind. So thank you, sir. Is there any other questions from council that I may have spurred on? Seeing none, thank you, sir. And I know the same as all our other present presenters, we've got a copy of your PowerPoint as well. So thank you again, and thank you for bearing with us on this late evening.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I think that that completes the deputation portion of this evening's agenda. Sorry, my clerk has reminded me that we will look for a motion to note and receive all of the deputations that we've heard this evening. Moved by Councillor Shank, seconded by Deputy Mayor Calver. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. I think there's one more piece. I'd like to do the correspondence with respect to the items on the agenda, because there's a number of correspondence that are related to this evening's deputations, Madam Clerk. So if I'll put it out to council, is if there's anything that somebody wants pulled out of those correspondence, please, we can pull it out and have a conversation with it. If not, then I'd be looking for a motion to note and receive correspondence items on the agenda, which would be 7.31 through to 7.3.5. And it's there are a number of correspondence there with respect to what we've heard this evening with the deputations. I'll look for a motion to note receive then. Moved by Councillor Pennell, seconded by Councillor Martin. No further comments, questions, or concerns. All in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. We've still got an extremely lengthy agenda this evening. What I would like to do, under the direction of hopefully my Madam Clerk, is to try and explore and see if there's something that is really time sensitive on our agenda that maybe we can do. And then if not, then I think because of the late hour, we'll put some of these matters into our unfinished business and deal with them at our next council meeting. The only question I have from the proponents, in order to be completely fair and transparent, is we now know that and I think we've known before that the date of December 12th is the date that if we were to provide the letter of support, it needs to be done by then. if we were to put some of this, because we still got a number of staff reports to go through, if we were to put those matters over to the 28th of November, would that still provide each of your organizations, if you were successful in getting the letter of support, to get your applications into the IESO? I'm getting some nods from everybody this evening. Okay. Well, yeah, and we do apologize. I mean, obviously, this is a very we've had a lot of conversations, and we've absorbed a ton of information this evening, right? So, but due to the late hour, I don't think we're doing anybody any services by trying to plug through till 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. So, if you folks are able to get your stuff in, if we provide something by the 28th of November, that's great. So, Madam Clerk, at this point, can we go through the agenda to see if there's anything time sensitive that we need to deal with this evening? And if not, then we can put it over to our next regular session of council.
Through your worship, I'm going to look to my colleagues on that side of the room. I do not believe there is anything here that is crucial to deal with tonight. We may put some of the utilities items on the not the bill forgiveness, but just the information reports on Thursday's budget meeting instead, if there's a desire to deal with those in a timely manner. But otherwise, just I suppose we all will know that we will have a very long meeting on the 28th ahead of us.
So that being said, did you want to go through line by line matter and just see what we need to put on maybe Thursday's budget meeting, and or if some of the stuff can be put on to the 28th, or do we need a special session prior to the 28th?
So through your worship, under your procedure bylaw, is if the meeting is adjourned before an item is dealt with, it will automatically be placed under the unfinished business on the next meeting agenda, next regular session meeting agenda. If there is anything time sensitive, I am seeing a note. I think honestly, the only thing we might want to deal with tonight, just because there was a request for it from a budget perspective, is that report for information on the water pollution control plant upgrade. But that can also be put over till Thursday.
Okay, well, I mean, it's 10:30. Let's deal with that one then, Madam Clerk, if we can. And then the rest of it can go into unfinished business for the 28th of November. And I believe we have Ms. Kelly here to speak to that.
So at the recent utilities budget meeting, there was a request for additional information on the wastewater treatment plant project, just to give everyone a background of where we're at and where we're hoping to go in the future. So there's 2 phases of the project as it stands. There's the maintenance garage building, which we're calling phase 1, and then there's the expansion of the actual treatment process, which we refer to as phase 2. So the maintenance garage building was approved by council and in previous, I think in a couple of different meetings. We pre-purchased pre-engineered steel structure. And then more recently, we awarded the project to the contractor to follow through with that. That building, we do call it a maintenance garage, but that is basically the building that houses or will replace, our 45 commercial court garage there. It's a 4-bay structure, 975 square meters. It has office space for currently 6 of our operators will move into there, and our utilities operations manager. And it'll kind of be like our main hub for the expansion of the wastewater treatment plant. Inside we'll have heated storage to replace what we used 45 commercial court for our hydrovac and our specialized dig equipment that needs to stay in a heated garage structure for those emergency situations. And then phase 2 of the project is expected to be the actual expansion of the treatment process. As you've probably heard in previous meetings, we're looking at a different technology and hope to have the detailed design of that ready early next year. So what council has approved to date is, the maintenance garage building. And I think through the table there, you have the funds portrayed for you, the costs that we expect to have towards that phase 1 of the project in 2023. Projected year end would be $4.1 million, and then an additional $1.9 million in 2024, and that will complete the project around $6 million. For phase 2 of the treatment, that's the treatment process upgrades. So to date, we've put in money for pre-engineering of that. There's been a selection of the AGS technology that came before council, basically to get some of their drawings to move forward with the detailed design. But the rest of the costs that are projected in 2024 were included in the capital portion of the utilities budget, but those are subject to council's approval at a later date. So that's what we would expect to spend late. It would probably be September-ish of 2024 if we began actual construction. That is not something that council is approving by putting this in the capital budget. We're putting that line item there, but we will, when we have the detailed design complete, or at 90%, we will come forth with, we'll have actual cost estimates of what the total cost of the project will look like. And we'll be then basically bringing a financing strategy for council's consideration at that time. One thing I will note for your information is that we were awarded up to $14 million in federal funding that does have to be used by 2027. So just something that, the timelines are somewhat flexible, but we do have to keep moving forward if we're going to utilize that funding. So that was a very quick overview. I'm available for questions if anyone has any.
Thanks, Christy. Is there any questions for Christy with respect to, go ahead, Councilor Pennell.
Thank you, Worship, through you, Christy. Thank you very much for coming back, bringing this back to us on this. I still get bent out a little bit on the terminology, the words here. If we could just take a look at the report that you provided, Resolution 104/23, as luck would have it, it would be myself that moved it. But it was for the maintenance garage building pre-selection report, and further council authorized the staff to award the contract to supply, deliver, and assemble to Belcon Belcon Design Builders for the amount of $1,548,645. And then there was another resolution 408/23 that council received for information from Infrastructure Utilities Upgrade Project, maintenance building tender award for $5,200,000. What's the difference between those two buildings?
So through your worship, it's the same building. So what we did in the first resolution that you referenced is we pre-purchased that building. It's a pre-engineered prefab steel building that they basically brought to us. And then they're on site with the contractors, the Wempen Smith, the contractors noted in the second one, to complete the build of that building. So Belcon is on site basically putting up the steel structure, and then Wempen Smith will do all the finish work. They're pouring the concrete or their subcontractors doing the walls and the structure, office space and everything inside the building.
Okay, thanks. But those two numbers don't add up to the $6 million that I see in the chart.
So there's a difference of, I think, $623,000 there. And if you look at the staff reports, and I apologize, maybe I didn't make it clear here, that was accounted for twice. So that was accounted for in the Belcon, the original resolution or staff report, and then it was in the second one, and there's a note in there saying that it's minus that amount. So it will total the just over $6 million. So the first resolution we're speaking to, when we pre-purchased the building, it was 1.459462, and then the $5.2 million for the Wempen-Smith contract minus the $623,000.
Okay, thanks. I'm just wondering, should we have an amendment to that resolution that shows that then?
They were within, it was specified in the staff report.
It was, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Pennell. Is there any other questions for Christy with respect to her report or presentation? Seeing none, we'll look for a motion to not receive Christie's report. Moved by Councilor Pennell, seconded by Councilor Deputy Mayor Calver. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of the motion? Opposed, motion's carried. I think at this point, Madam Clerk, we'll look for a motion for adjournment. Yep, that's correct. Yes, we will do the bylaw to confirm proceedings. Look for a motion for the bylaw to confirm the proceedings of this evening's meeting. Moved by Councilor Hicks, seconded by Councilor Martin. Ready, first, second, and finally passed this 14th day of November 2023. All in favor of the motion? Opposed, motion's carried, and a motion for adjournment. Moved by Deputy Mayor Calver, seconded by Councilor Martin. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed, motion's carried. Thanks, folks. It's been a long evening. We've been at this for just about 7 hours, so we'll see you in a couple of days for budget and then on the 28th. Thank you.